Okay, okay, we are rolling to the conclusion of an incredible 3 days, and nobody better to sum it all up, put into a little bundle, and take us into where we're going very much today. Probably the best historian in the field, one of the researchers I respect the most. When Richard says it, it's true. He's not a skeptic, but he's a researcher, he's a scholar. So let's give Richard Dolan a big, big hand for being here.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hello. Let's see if I can get this to my level. You can hear. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm assuming you can all hear me. So if you can't, just raise your hand or yell at me, and we'll make sure I get this microphone set up. So Tracy woke up earlier than I did, which is usually the case, and I'm hearing her with one eye open, and she's like, "You're going to have to read the news very soon because there's something big going on here." And my reaction was, "Oh, crap, I didn't want to do that." But it's just more work. Who wants to do more work? But this was very significant indeed. So I did get up, made a coffee, read the article, and I thought, good Lord, this is very significant news indeed. So I had a lecture already planned, and so let me just tell you what the plan originally was. The original plan was to talk about this here, ET and our AI revolution, what are we able to know? And then I couldn't really, I put so much work into that, and it was the most difficult of the 3 presentations I'm doing here this weekend. And it ended up being something a little different. I gave it an alternate title, E.T. and Humanity's Fourth Stage. I'm all about talking about that. What's the deal? And it just expanded into a lot. And then came this, breaking news. So I read the... I read this very informative article by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. This is not from the New York Times, which they have, of course, I think most of you probably know, written some very important articles for the New York Times over the last few years. No, this is for the Debrief, which has turned in, the last few years, a very important UFO-related news site, I guess you could say. They do some very good work over there. And just as a little background, I recall discussing this with either Leslie or Ralph. I think Leslie. And definitely had the impression that they felt they had gone as far as they were going to be allowed to go with the New York Times. This is the impression that I've always had. And so I'm not surprised to see their work appearing now in a place like this. I think this is a very appropriate area for them. And, it's not the New York Times, but at this point in the game, if it's Leslie and Ralph, it might as well be the New York Times as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, what ended up happening is I read this article, read it carefully, analyzed it, bullet pointed it, which you're going to see all of that, and essentially added about 10 slides to this lecture dealing with this. So there's a lot. If you do not know what I'm talking about, you will very shortly. And then my original plan was, I actually went over my original lecture, added a few things to that to sort of smooth it into this whole thing. And then as I was literally walking out the hotel door, I got a phone call from Danny Sheehan. And Danny said, "Well, Richard, there's going to be a big press conference at 3 p.m. our time all about this story." He said, "My workshop follows yours. How about this as an idea? At 3 o'clock, it's in 2 hours from now, we switch gears and we run the press conference." Now, I have no idea how long that press conference is. Like everything's cloudy and crazy. And all I said was, yes, sure, no problem. So they're going to do that at 3. And then he's got a workshop following this one. I don't know if it's in this room or in a different room. I have no idea. Different room. And then he said to me, "Well, would you help co-run my workshop with me?" So I'm thinking, what about my dinner, man? I want to eat some food because I'm all about my food. But I did say yes to that too because I actually was born without a spine. You may not have known that. So I said, yes, I will do that. I will do that for you, Danny, and for the world. We're going to do this. So I don't really have the slightest idea. I haven't a clue how this is all going to end up. Not a clue, but I have a feeling it's going to be in a good place. So with that said, who asked me not to do what? I prefer not to be interrupted during my lecture, if that's okay. We can have Q&A after, but I would just request, let me do this, because I don't even have enough time for any of the things that I want to do. Thank you. So let's talk about this. So I did wake up, finally. I got my coffee, and Tracy's over on the couch, and I'm sitting down, and I'm reading this article. So this is Leslie and Ralph. The headline, as you can see, intelligence officials say U.S. has retrieved craft of non-human origin. So I'll give you my breakdown. I went through this. You can go to the debrief. It's dated today. This man you're looking at is named David Grush. And in fact, I didn't know how to pronounce his name. I didn't know if it was Grush or Grush, but Danny called me. He said it was Grush. Danny Sheehan knows all of these guys in this article. Not surprising. But anyway, this man, David Grush, you can see him here. He is, as I indicated, a former intelligence official, highly decorated combat officer. There's some pictures of him from Afghanistan from 10 years ago. Anyway, he has provided Congress and the intelligence community inspector general with extensive classified information about covert programs possessing retrieved craft of non-human origin. This is me just breaking it down. This is the overview here. So he's given them information about this. Who is this guy? How does he know what he knows? Well, he served on what's called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA. I recall chatting about this a little bit with Chris Mellon a couple of years ago. I didn't know what this was, and Mellon's like, that's a very significant agency. Anyway, so he was with that, and this is one I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, which is, absolutely one of the most secretive and powerful intelligence agencies in the United States, founded in absolute secrecy, I think 1960 or 61, and to this day is very little information other than it manages all of our spy satellites and space activities. So he's with those two organizations. And if you recall, Chris Mellon wrote an article a couple of years ago stating our satellites have all the information on UFOs. And Mellon at the time said, where's the Air Force with all of this? They have all these space satellites. They're not telling us anything. They're just out to lunch. Mellon argued that the amount of data on our satellites, 4K resolution, all of it is so overwhelming that it absolutely has a ton of UFO data, and yet it's all absent. Well, this man, David Grush, clearly has access to that stuff, it seems to me, with these organizations. And then most significantly, perhaps, is that he was part of the UAP task force from 2019 to 2021. So this guy has been in the thick of it. None of us have known about him except a few insiders. Mellon, of course, Danny, Lou Elizondo, a bunch of others have known about him, but most of us have not, and I have not. So this is it. So going on. So Grush has stated that the U.S. government and its allies and defense contractors have recovered partial fragments and intact vehicles of non-human origin for decades. He stated that the analyses of these items suggest that they are of exotic origin because of their unique atomic arrangements. So, they've gotten down into that level of a study of these things. That's very significant. Their radiological signatures, so again, very sophisticated testing, and material science testing results, presumably things like metamaterials or whatever else is going on with that. My first lecture here, I think, what's missing in our UAP conversation? I spent a little time talking about the Battelle Memorial Institute, which I was saying is one of the most advanced metallurgical places in the world where they've got the leading experts. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that work was being done over at Battelle. But anyway, let's keep going here. He stated, well, attested in his testimony that in 2021, so he was in the UAP task force of 2019 to 2021, that in 2021, he actually made the complaint that critical information on UAP was being withheld illegally from Congress on purpose, preventing proper oversight. So after 2 years on the committee, he decided that there were shenanigans, cover-up going on, and he issued a complaint. As a result of that, he was subjected to what he calls illegal retaliation against him, essentially as a whistleblower. We can call him that. I think it's fair to call him a whistleblower in this instance. And as a result of his statement in 2021, was subjected to measures against him. I don't know the specific measures. Personally, professionally, it's not clear, but the hammer came down on him. And so that was his situation for the last couple of years. He also stated there has been a decades-long unknown or publicly unknown Cold War. What about? About the recovery and exploitation of these UFOs, crash and acquired tech in order to gain military advantages. No surprise there. It's something we've probably, many of us have talked about. I've talked about it. He only 2 months ago left U.S. government employment. So he was a government employee up until April 2023. He sounds a bit like Lou Elizondo in a way. He left the government, he said, to promote government accountability through public awareness. And in the article, in Leslie and Ralph's article here, they actually bring out a number of very, very high-level individuals who have vouched for this man's credibility. So he's not just a lone guy twisting out in the wind. He has got a lot of support from apparently highly respected individuals, and so there's that. And one of the things that Leslie and Ralph wrote here, and I guess this is true, is they said that his case can be seen as a test. A test for what? Well, for them, a test for the effectiveness of the new whistleblower protections that have just recently been established, as many of you know, through the last NDAA, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and that whole thing. And I guess that's really true. And, excuse me, if we can see how this whole thing's playing out, you can see this as a victory for the Whistleblower Protection Act. If it turns out that way, it looks promising. Let me discuss some of the implications of this article. These are implications explicitly implicit, if I can say that, in the article itself. And then I'm going to go on and talk about some of my own thoughts here. But out of the article, I think that some of the main takeaways that Leslie and Ralph are asking us to have. I'm putting potential confirmation of non-human intelligence. It's kind of a big thing. I mean, what do we mean by confirmation? Well, that can be debated, I suppose, but I'm starting to wonder if we're getting to a bit of a tipping point here in the amount of evidence that is being brought forth. It's always tricky to try to analyze absolutely new breaking news. I mean, this is the same morning, and I don't want to go overboard here necessarily, but I would say this is potentially a very significant development. We'll just have to see where it goes. Another implication deals with advanced technologies, and by that I simply mean they're talking in here. They quoted Dr. Gary Nolan, for example, and I think probably a lot of you may have been familiar with Gary's interview from just, I think, 2 weeks ago. A very important interview indeed, where he's discussing, yes, 100% certainty that ET have been here. And he said, we really could use some of this technology to maybe fix a few things in this world. And he made a very strong statement for that. And that comes through in this article as well. So you get this idea that, there's some very advanced technology. It has clearly, or at least evidently, been withheld from us for a long time. Again, this is stuff that we've talked about for years in our community. And let's see, if maybe we can get access to it for the betterment of our society and so forth. So that's another definite implication in this article. Another implication, and this one I'm going to come back to because I find this one particularly intriguing and a little almost questionable. This is where I'm going to take a little issue here. But they talk about the national security implications. And really there's a big suggestion in this article. And I'm afraid that of all the things in here, this is the one that may get overlooked the most as moving forward. We'll have to see. But the implication is that, nations have been competing. They don't say Russia. They don't say China. They don't say any other nation, in fact. But I think that seems to be the implication. So that there's been this international competition in this covert arms race to gain what they call asymmetric defense advantages. And the thing that I'm going to come back to that, but just it does seem that they're promoting a little bit of a Cold War kind of element to this disclosure with that type of a statement. And it may be true. It may be true, but we're going to come back to that in a minute. Another implication is the whole whistleblower protection thing, dealing with government transparency and accountability. And I think rightly so, their article does say, look, this is an important development also. This is a test for us and our society in having proper accountability and transparency in this very important process of disclosure. I mean, maybe we can use that word in this case, disclosure, sure. And there are a couple of statements in that article dealing with, how do we put this? Preparing the public for more truths about aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever these beings are. You really get the impression, I'm sure some of you have read this article already, and if you haven't, you very likely will, there's definitely this bit of a tease going on indicating there's more to come. And are we on a track here now for a genuine opening up of some serious truths? Things started off about five and a half years ago, and I think most of us would say they slowed down and maybe even stalled to some extent. Maybe they didn't completely stall. So, but now I think we're seeing potential forward motion on all of that. So, a couple of other issues here. Now, one of the individuals quoted in this article was a man named Jonathan Gray. I'd never heard of him before. He is an intelligence officer. They said he specializes in UAP analysis at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. That is a significant agency, of course. A couple of things he said I didn't like. I'll just be honest about it. He mentioned the so-called archaic and preposterous notion that the United States has been solely responsible for the UFO cover-up. He used those two words. And I thought, you know what? The U.S. has dominated its allies for a long, long time and has preponderant influence over most of the world. I don't think it's archaic. I don't think it's preposterous. But it was interesting that he said it, and it was interesting that it made it into this article. I'm going to read this quote of Jonathan Gray. He says, and he's very pro UFOs are real. He does say that, but listen carefully to this. He says, though a tough nut to crack, potential technological advancements may be gleaned from non-human intelligence / UAP retrievals by any sufficiently advanced nation and then used to wage asymmetrical warfare. So, therefore, some secrecy must remain. I underline that. However, it is no longer necessary to continue to deny that these advanced technologies derived from non-human intelligence exist at all, or to deny that these technologies have landed, crashed, or fallen into the hands of human beings. And by the way, it just occurred to me that last statement, landed, crashed, or fallen into the hands, that's very, very much like in the words of Eric Davis from a couple of years ago. If you recall, back in 2019, Lou Elizondo did a piece on Tucker Carlson at that time. It was, I think, May 31st, 2019. It was a hell of an interview. And at the very end of it, it was just a 5-minute piece, Carlson asked Elizondo, have any of these, I think he said aircraft, come into our possession? But he obviously meant UFOs. And Elizondo stumbled a little bit because it was, he says, well, Tucker, I've got my NDA, which prohibits me from getting into this. And Carlson was ready to walk away from it, leave it alone. And then Elizondo said, but actually, Tucker, yes, they have. And that was at the end of the interview. It was amazing. So in the aftermath of that, a friend of mine and a great guy on YouTube, James Ian Dolan, who has a YouTube channel called Engaging the Phenomenon, he was in touch with not with Elizondo, with Eric Davis. And so he's writing to Davis, and this is when Davis was just instant messaging people back and forth all the time. Ian Dolan says, so what's up with this? Is this accurate? And on and on. And Davis, going off of memory here, but Davis said, Elizondo's statement about UFOs having crashed is 1,000% true. But then he amended that to say crashed, landed, or otherwise come into our possession, or something like that. So in other words, Davis amended the original thing to use wording very similar to what I'm seeing here by Jonathan Gray. I think that's interesting because they're saying it's not just crash retrievals. There's more than that, and that's interesting, isn't it? Like, how else did we get these things? They crashed, we got some of those. He's saying landed here. Is that a gift? What is the story behind that? Or fallen into the hands of human beings, however that vaguely means. So I just leave that out there. But the important thing, I guess, that I would just want to emphasize here is this idea where he starts off by saying, look, this is still significant national security, so we're going to have to still have some secrecy on this. And he's, it's not a difficult case to make, but I'm just pointing out this is, this is a shift in the whole process. So I have a couple of questions here. Are we looking at slow motion disclosure? If we are, and by slow motion disclosure, when I wrote After Disclosure with Bryce Zabel 13 years ago, we did not see slow motion disclosure happening. We saw avalanche. We saw avalanche happening. Of course, we wrote that book in 2010. It was a different world, a different situation, and we just thought, if this comes out even a little bit, it's going to go whoosh, just like a big thing, and it'll be this unstoppable force, this tidal wave. And we haven't been seeing that. We've been seeing this very slow kind of a drip with a very controlled media. The reason we thought avalanche back in 2010, though, was because we were looking at the internet as it existed at that time. And the internet really changed a lot from 2010 to 2015, like big time, and then onward. It's much more centrally controlled, as we all know. So now we're seeing this more controlled process. But anyway, I'm saying here, perhaps the stage is being set for an acknowledgement of UFO or UAP or even aliens, but with the government setting the stage for the need to maintain secrecy in order to maintain national security. They're definitely putting that proviso out there. It's just like a little placeholder for us to keep in mind. Yeah, we may do a little bit of a process here, but we still have to keep our secrets. So, again, I'm not saying it's not understandable, but I'm just saying they are doing everything they can to maintain control over this process. I am waiting for, I'm sure you are waiting for, any ultimate discussion of the aliens themselves. Is that going to happen? For example, do we have bodies? Are there bodies? None of this has come up yet. I would wait, and I'm not expecting this, but maybe it can happen, a discussion of the massive number of current UFO sightings. Let's not forget that. Here we are, we're talking about couple like Navy encounters with UAP, UFOs. We're talking now about this whole thing. But there's a UFO phenomenon or UAP phenomenon every single day around the world. What is that all about? I do think that's important, and at some point, it seems to me that needs to be integrated into the broader discussion. I talked about this a lot in my first lecture, What's Missing in Our UAP Discussion. I'm waiting for a discussion of whether we have an idea of who they are, what they are doing. These are important ideas, or will this just be ignored? Will this be dismissed due to, the idea of being archaic or preposterous or being affecting national security? I don't know. My final point on this, or at least for now, is that for the last 5+ years, there's been a very significant debate in this community of ours over what is happening with all the TTSA stuff and the revelations coming out in the news. Is this a CIA disinfo psyop or not, and what? And I have, for nearly the whole time, maintained that what we have been seeing is a battle of factions within the national security structure. And I feel that this current news validates that position. So I think you're seeing a struggle within the Pentagon and within the intelligence community. One faction, I would say, has no interest in any kind of disclosure whatsoever. And that has been the most powerful faction for 80 years. I think there's no question about that. The other faction, Mellon, Elizondo, David Grush, all of those people, they collectively have some interest in disclosure. And maybe some of them have a very strong interest in disclosure. They're not all the same, but collectively they certainly have some. But my observation is that they still have a strong allegiance to, the traditional national security establishment system that's out there. And so I don't really think that they're all in favor of a full, complete disclosure of the UAP, UFO situation. That's the impression I get. I think those are is that everything I have here? Yeah, so, this is all I put together this morning, so I didn't really have any more than that. But I think this probably gives a reasonable overview of the article, my, at least, initial take on it. There's much more, I'm sure, that can be said and that will be said on it, including by myself. So you know what would be good? Before I get into, I've really wondered how much of my next lecture, my main lecture, I can discuss, but what I would be happy to do, at least for a little while, is open it up for some Q&A. If anyone would like, we can go back and forth and see how far we go with that. Yes, sir? You had a question?
If we retrieve some landed craft, not drones, then we have the occupants.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that in the back. If we've retrieved landed craft, not drones, then there are occupants. Yes, absolutely. And of course, many of us who've studied this for a while know, through decades of leaked testimony to people like, OG researchers like Leonard Stringfield and a number of others, that indeed there have been bodies acquired many times, many bodies. I remember many of Stringfield's witnesses who talked about, on one occasion, 9 bodies being seen at Wright-Patterson in a facility there, or 3 bodies over here, or 4 bodies there. There, I think, have been a lot of bodies that have been acquired, at least judging by the testimony that's been acquired. So I would totally agree with that, and we're probably going to wait for the other shoe to drop on that. They'd be alive. Yeah, and, that's another thing. There have been a number of, I think, pretty good and credible claims of live beings having been acquired. And not only that, of live beings potentially doing work with our guys on these craft. Some of you remember the name Bill Uhouse, who was, former, I think he was a U.S. Marine and a defense contractor, specialized, he said, in testing these vehicles with at least one alien. I think that was the one he called J-Rod, and talked quite a lot about him. You watch U-House, I think there's some video of him. There's definitely testimony. He's quite believable, in my opinion. And he's not the only one. There's a number of these claims. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency in this, the mystery of them hiding something. They use this euphemism, crash.
Well, can you expand on that a little bit? Or?
I'd love to. There's advanced civilizations that can't fly their own airplanes. They're being shot down, and they're covering that up.
Oh, okay, that's a really good point. So if you didn't hear that in the back, the word crash is kind of a euphemism. It's actually a really good point. Very advanced civilizations, but their stuff just crashes, or were they shot down? And in fact, we know back even in the 40s and 50s, we had shoot them down orders, book by that name by Frank Fascino, great book dealing with the 1950s. And the Soviets also had, at various times, apparently orders to that effect. So yeah, the question is, what kind of trouble in paradise has there been? What kind of conflict have we been dealing with?
And what kind of help we could have used in a more friendly fashion that is stolen out of that pipeline? Sometimes you grab this stuff and we don't get it.
Right.
They're covering up.
Exactly, what has been kept from us and all that. Any other points? Yes, sir.
Yeah. You believe Bob Lazar?
I'm sorry.
You believe Bob
Do I believe Bob Lazar? Yeah, I do. I've pretty much always have. I wrote about Bob Lazar in a book from 2009, my second volume of UFOs in a National Security State. That's when I really kind of solidified my thoughts about him. And I wrote about 10 or 12 pages about him there in that book. And I do feel that he was fundamentally truthful. People argue about his education, MIT, Caltech. That really has not ever been a big problem for me, to be honest. My understanding is that he audited courses, at least at Caltech. Here's another crazy thing. I don't want to get too sidetracked because we have important things. But for 20 years, I wrote professional resumes for job seekers. And back in the 90s, I'm going to tell you, people lied on their resumes all the time. Like I could tell when they lied. Like I'm not going to fact check them in 1994. It's like I don't really have the energy, and I don't really care. But it's obvious. And I did have one client who came in. She's a really nice human resource officer. And she came in and she said, I got caught lying on my resume. I felt bad for her, but it did happen. She was a nice person, honest. She was an honest person, but she lied on her resume. I think, in our era today, we know, like, you're not going to get away ever doing that sort of thing. So we're like, oh my God, you can't do that. But in 1989, 1990, I'm sorry to say this, but people would fudge things. It doesn't mean that they're pathological liars. So that's my take on Lazar. Yes, sir.
Is this the first mainstream press mention that you're familiar with the retrieval, press retrieval?
Excellent question. Is this the first mainstream mention? Not exactly. Close, though. It's the most explicit. So back in July of 2020, Leslie and Ralph wrote an article, I think it was their last one for the New York Times, in which it really came within a hair's breadth of stating that there were crash retrievals. They quoted Dr. Eric Davis pretty extensively to that effect and went right up to the line, but they didn't go over it. So I think this is the most explicit. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I missed
Oh, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, I missed the beginning of this, but I'm not sure if you know the Daily Mail is carrying online the headline. And to be honest, it's experimenting on UFO parts and frustrating aircraft to make weapons ready for disappear. That's their headline as well.
The Daily Mail says that this is to make weapons.
Yeah, and also there's an interview with Bush on News Nation. Did you hear that?
With whom?
Is it good?
David Grush, or yeah.
We better learn how to say that, won't we?
Yeah.
But anyways, Bush and it's they're doing an interview, exclusive interview on News Nation tonight at 6:00, and I've got a trailer on here if you want to run the audio.
Well, we are going to be running a live press conference here at 3 p.m. So in about 90 minutes. So that's the plan as far as I know. I just do what they tell me to do here. So Danny Sheehan's going to come in here. We're going to run. David Grush will be. Someone said that Ross Coulthard's doing a thing with him, but I don't really know what the 3 o'clock thing's going to say. So it's going to be as much of a surprise to me.
But he's talked about multiple recovered vehicles.
multiple recovered vehicles. Well, yeah, that's kind of in line with what Leslie and Ralph have written here. The Daily Mail headline, I don't know if you heard that in the back, was that the Pentagon is using these to develop advanced weaponry. But actually, it's just a sensationalist spin, because it is true. He says, look, he states the obvious, that this technology has significant military implications, and that it is the focal point of a covert Cold War among factions or nations to develop asymmetrical warfare capabilities. That's how he puts it. So I guess you could put it that way. I see a hand right back there. Yes.
Just tweeted 30 minutes ago. Blumenthal and both say they brought this to were urged by outside sources.
They both brought this to where? I'm sorry.
Initially brought
Oh.
to the Washington Post.
And then were urged.
They were dragging their feet. They didn't do it fast enough, so they went somewhere else.
Okay. That's good to know.
Time was of the essence.
So we'll just repeat, if you didn't hear that, Leslie and Ralph wrote this. They originally approached the Washington Post to break this story, and apparently the Post dragged its feet a little bit. Well, it is a CIA publication, so I mean, it really is. So so Leslie and Ralph did it with the debrief. So that's good to know. In the New York Sun? I don't know that paper. Thank you, though. Okay. Yes, sir.
Those people who are old enough, this sounds like an episode of the old TV program, You Are There.
You Are There. I don't know that one. Now, I thought I was old enough for this stuff, but I don't remember that one. Episode of You Are There. Some nodding heads in the audience here. So good to know. Yes, ma'am. And I'll get some in the back as well. Yes.
PR people, there are public relations people. I think they're setting in the interest of the upcoming thing with Stephen Greer and the government thing that's coming up June 12th. So maybe this is going to get people's attention. Most all the newspapers.
Well, it definitely is going to fall into the lap of Stephen Greer, who's got his own press conference next week. I don't know if this is done for that reason. I somehow doubt it, but it will definitely probably benefit him, yes, without a doubt. So, any question? Any hands in the back or not? You know. Yes, sir.
Didn't NASA just tell us a couple weeks ago there was no evidence that they acknowledged that there was UAPs, there was no evidence of interference?
It wasn't NASA, but it was Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of the All-Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, ARROW, which is the current version of the UAP task force. He gave a hearing about a month ago or so where he did say that. You're right. He said, there's some interesting things here, but there's no evidence that these are extraterrestrial or anything ultra-exotic like that. So he did make that statement explicitly. So, anyone else?
Right here, Elizondo tweets today, my friend and former colleague, thank you for your courage and honesty.
Rock on. Yeah, very good. So I think, we're seeing a definite coalition that's been building here. And it is interesting to see, isn't it? Like we're seeing a definite factional war, at least that's what it looks like to me, take place right before our eyes in this battle for, hey, ending the truth embargo. Let's use Steve Bassett's expression. Why not? Question right back there, sir?
How do you think this is going to change what people like you do? Because you have been talking about secrecy and difficult to find things. It's very interesting and it's true.
Yeah.
As that sort of investigated, but now if it comes out, what do you do?
Oh, are you kidding me? I have more to do than ever before. In fact, what I was going to do was my actual lecture, which is quite relevant to all this, which is an analysis of these other beings. Like, who are they? What are they doing? How do we assess their activity? Like, there's a tremendous amount of questions we need to be asking about the UFO phenomenon. I'm still calling it UFOs. We can switch it to UAP one day. But there are many questions that remain. And
But wouldn't all this unravel and then what you're talking about would become official? Like official investigation into who they are?
well, I'm just a historian, man. I'm just, and I'm a historian about the UFO or UAP subject. And so if it comes out officially, Well, that's a history I can write. That's how I look. Yeah. Well, a victory lap. I'm no. Well, what I would want to do is continue to write books about this subject, and so to chronicle it, to narrate it, and give it a voice that people would like to read. So. If you're writing about the cover-up pre-disclosure, that's one thing. If you're writing about the end of the cover-up post-disclosure, well, then I'll write about that. I don't have any skin in the game in the sense of, I need the cover-up to continue so I can keep the whole let's fight the government thing. Like, that's not my game, I can tell you right now. Although I have been, occasionally people will accuse me of that, like, these guys are grifters, they don't want real disclosure, that ends their whole charade. And it's like, no, man, I'll find something to do. Like, the subject is interesting, and I'll find a way. So yes, ma'am.
Why is it so hard to convince people that
Well, why is it so hard to convince people that the CIA is embedded in our media? Great question, because the CIA is very, very effective at what they do. Back in 1967, many of you know about this, CIA, they didn't necessarily coin the phrase conspiracy theory, thank you, my brain but they probably brought it into our modern lexicon. And this was back in 67, the CIA had an internal memo dealing with the then recent JFK assassination, remember that, and the fact that they were in danger of having their narrative slip away. People questioning the Warren report. And so this was a problem. You gotta wonder, why was this a problem for the CIA? They deal with international stuff. But nonetheless, US public opinion, this was becoming a danger. And they said, well, we need to use our assets in the media and the press to educate the public in the right way. And they used the phrase conspiracy theory explicitly as a way to kind of kneecap the opposition in that regard. CIA has factually, we know for a fact, has embedded itself in our media for generations. It's not a matter of dispute, but you're right, most people are not aware, they don't want to believe it. I remember 40 years ago, I was in my early 20s, and I was at some, college, university thing, whatever, and I met this journalist, this woman who had just come back from Central America in the early 80s. So back then you got the death squads in Guatemala, Honduras, and she's saying how the CIA was dominating all the media in that region and in our country. And I knew nothing about, I knew so little really about it at the time. And I thought, you're a little crazy. But of course she wasn't crazy, she was exactly right. She was exactly right. But I had this, this training at the time to think that was all Looney Tunes. So we have a powerful propaganda system in our world. And, the sad fact is, there's people like us. So we're the fanatics. We're the independent thinkers. We're the people who are used to thinking for ourselves. But most people, and we all have family. I love my family. I love my relatives. But they're not going to go fighting the system. They're not going to go take on, fight the power 24/7. They don't want to. They don't have the desire. They don't have really the education. Okay. They don't have. If they're a guy, they want to watch the football games. If they're a woman, they want to follow someone on Facebook. I don't know what it is, but they just want to. I don't mean to be mean, but we have our little world that we like to live in, and we don't want to think that our government is actually against us and fixed. We don't want to think it. So we got what's that? One more time.
Is it normalcy bias?
Normalcy bias. Oh yeah, good phrase.
You're just afraid that they don't want anything to change.
Yeah, I think they don't want anything to change. I had a wonderful, beautiful grandmother who was like an angel in my life. But she didn't really know anything about the world. And for me to get mad, I'd be like, Grandma, don't you know about contemporary geopolitical developments? Like, hey, I'm not going to expect her to do that. She's my grandmother. I loved her. So you can only expect certain things out of the people we love, and that's just how it is. And so, yeah, as unfortunately, people can be manipulated very, very easily. I want to get off of that. Any other? You, sorry. Yeah.
Even though everybody wants that full disclosure in the mainstream media, like you were taking that lecture, the government has been lying for like 70 years. So that is what I am most afraid is that when that full disclosure comes in the media, that what is behind that.
Yes.
I don't know what you think about the, I don't trust
Yeah.
the mainstream media, but
What's the 4D chess game that they're playing? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that. I didn't create a slide for it, but let's explore that now. So let's just think that let's say we're the controllers. We have the secret, and we know. Oh yeah, there's a UFO phenomenon. Oh yeah, there's aliens that we've acquired. We've got their technology. Oh yeah, some of them are here. Maybe some of them are collaborating with Lockheed Martin. Who knows? I mean, seriously. I spoke with a gentleman this weekend who gave me reason to think, first of all, who provided me with some very good corroborative support for these classic 1988 ARV story. Some of you know this, the alien reproduction vehicle at Lockheed, that we were building our own flying saucers based on alien tech. This man, who, I don't know if he's here today, but he was here, spoke with me in some detail, and I have his contact info now. But he had information supporting that, even several years earlier than 1988. So let's say all of that is true, and we know all of this, and we know just how deep it goes. And now we're realizing, well, okay, so a little too much toothpaste has come out of the tube. So let's say the TTSA crowd, let's just say that they are legit, which I think they were, that they were a faction that wanted to promote some level of disclosure. Let's just say that happened. And they succeeded. They used Leslie and Ralph to get information out there and kind of opened up a new discussion. And now we're the secret keepers, and we've been on the back foot for a little while now. We have to deal with this problem. We're very angry about it. So we try to smear Elizondo for a few years. You know, through our representatives, we say, he wasn't really part of ATIP. That was a lie. And we do all of these things, but it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Elizondo has support. People like Danny Sheehan supports him and others. And so now we're realizing, okay, this is continuing. We have to deal with this. So if we're going to allow information to come out, we're going to want to have it come out in as controlled a fashion as possible. That would make perfect sense. You know, an old expression is the best way to keep a secret is to pretend to share it. So that this is an old game. You know, you have to give up a little bit in order to satisfy the other side so that you can then retain what you have that remains, however much you can. And I do think that that is absolutely the game. So the real question will be, you know, we don't have a disclosure here. I mean, this is a whistleblower involved in a congressional process, but it's not an official U.S. government statement, of course. So we have to keep in mind, this is not the U.S. government saying, yes, it's real. So if we get to a point where the United States government puts its power and weight and force behind an actual disclosure statement, yes, we're going to want to look at that very carefully. We're going to want to see what they are acknowledging and what they are not discussing. And what guardrails, we can use that phrase, to use the AI phrase, because AI's got all guardrails in there. What guardrails are going to put on our discussion? What parameters? What are the limits? There definitely will be. So I've been saying for a while that the secrecy faction, that's the top ones there, that has no interest in this, they will delay this for as long as humanly possible. If they can delay it for another 5 years, they'll do it. If they could delay it for 50, they will do that. They'll go for as long as possible because I continue to believe that there's not a good upside for them in giving it up. But I think other people have different opinions. Obviously, I know they have different opinions. And so where this is going to end up, I don't know. I mean, we're just going to have to walk through this and just take it one step at a time, I guess. Yes, sir?
Stephen Bassett has an interesting about what he thinks is going on. Where this was aware before ahead of time kind of things.
Yeah. If you heard that, Steve Bassett has always had a very strong sense of urgency about disclosure. I'm not trying to, I'm definitely not want to make fun at Steve's expense, but I love the guy. He knows that. We have kind of debated this over 20 plus years. I remember back in 2002, 21 years ago, that was the first time I met him in person, I think. And this is the days of George W. Bush. This is like right after 9/11. And Steve was saying, Richard, this is going to be opening up any time now. And I thought, you're taking some really good drugs. I want what you're taking. I didn't believe it. I said, Bush, they're never going to do that. Are you kidding me? So I was right on that one. But I also knew at some point he was going to be right. Because I used to say disclosure is impossible and inevitable. It's kind of a paradox. And the impossibility you can see because, there's just so many forces on that side of it. But the inevitability you can see too. I mean, at some point, we have to assume truth will come out at some point. But how long? Decades or centuries is really the question. And we'll say, your hand is up again, so yeah. All right, so I don't know if you heard that in the back. Is that me or? All right. We all have the same ringtone, I think. So full disclosure will happen when full digital control over the web is achieved. I agree with you because I've been saying this for at least 10 years. Like literally, I've been saying this for 10 years. I fully agree with that. I used to say, I gave lectures on this back in 2010, 2011, and I said, we're in a foot race with the establishment, with the elite, the secret keepers. And the race is whoever gets to the finish line first wins. The finish line being if we get there first, before they lock down total digital control over the world, we can achieve a breakthrough and destabilize their hold over the truth. If they get there first, they will establish full digital control and then will roll out whatever form of disclosure they wish. Because at some point you have to assume they're going to need to update the old narrative. We're in a new era where the old statements of the Air Force of the 50s or 60s, we're not really going to believe that now. It's just not possible. So they have to maintain some credibility. And you could say, and let's just put this out as a possibility, which I have not mentioned here, that all of this, is it possible that everything we've seen is a step-by-step plan of updating the UFO narrative? I acknowledge it is absolutely possible that all of it, even the whole TTSA part of it, even the whistleblower faction, you could say it's part of a grand narrative simply to update, give the UFO UAP subject a facelift for the rest of the 21st century. Maybe that's it. We'll have to see. I think we're going to probably, I could talk about my other lecture or not. I don't really care. If you want to go with my lecture, I won't be able to finish it, but we can, I will tell you, there's some good stuff in here. So, and then in 1 hour, we are going to, I agreed to let Danny and the tech people bring in the press conference. So I hope that's going to be okay. It's interesting. It's kind of exciting. Breaking news. I don't know anything about what to expect for it. So it's as new for me as for you. So AI, this was a kind of a tricky presentation for me to work out. And because I've been interested in AI and ET for over 20 years. I think, I don't know for a fact, but I believe that I was the first, at least known UFO researchers to start writing openly about AI and UFOs. I did articles on this in 2002, 2003, and I speculated then that a good portion of the UFO subject could probably be explained by advanced alien AI. That was what I said back then. I think it's true. I think it's more obviously true now than it was 20 years ago. But the AI revolution that we're now currently seeing in our world, and it definitely is, has to be said. It's part of a larger transformation in our world, which includes transhumanism. We're not really in the full transhumanist stage yet. We're in the beginnings of it. We've got advanced CRISPR technology, gene editing, of course, and we're going to be looking at designer babies and DIY, do-it-yourself gene therapy is actually already exists. People are doing this now. I don't know how widespread, but I remember watching a Netflix special on this with Tracy about a year ago. It was fascinating and a little scary, but it's absolutely out there. So we're in the beginning phases of transhumanism. We are definitely in the midst of a global revolution. And it actually, having said that, it makes me wonder, how do these new UAP revelations fit into that? We'll have to keep asking that. But by global revolution, we all kind of went through COVID together. And we all saw the breathtaking coordinated response of the world's nations to the COVID reality. We saw how the talking points were exactly the same. Build back better. Where the hell did that come from? Well, it came from Davos, and which then inserted itself into every major Western government, which it has done for years. All the slogans were the same. All of the policies were the same. It was obvious that each of these nations no longer existed as sovereign entities, but they were getting their marching orders from somewhere else. And basically, they're getting from Davos and Bilderberg, is what I have said, and I continue to believe. So it's a global revolution. I will be talking about that here, hopefully within this hour that I have here for it. Well, just to summarize, it's a revolution that is designed, this is a very extreme thing to say, but stay with me. It is designed to corral and redesign humanity to fit within a new structure of society that requires a new humanity and a new organization. And it's radical. It's more of a radical change than we've ever seen ever. More than the changes of the Industrial Revolution. More even than, or at least as great as the changes of developing agriculture 10,000 years ago. It's on that level, but maybe even more so, and much more rapidly. So it's a dramatic redesign of the human species, which requires lies from up on top, because if you're the genius visionaries of the World Economic Forum and you know what's best, you know what's coming, you know that AI is going to take away the jobs of who knows how many people. Yeah, we're told they're going to create more jobs, but does anyone really think that it's going to create as many as it takes away? Not me, and probably not you. So if we're the masters of our world here, we're going to know that as Henry Kissinger once called them, the great useless eaters of the world, we're going to have to deal with them, with these little people, us. Well, what do you do with them? Well, are we going to kill them all off? No, they don't probably plan to do that, at least dramatically, but maybe they will winnow us out. We are looking at a massive depopulation, probably. I mean, it's crazy to say this, there's 8 billion of us, but we are looking at a massive demographic crisis happening in this world. I think many of you are aware of this. And so that's happening. There's allegation after allegation that the COVID and the vaccines are contributing to that. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but it's not difficult to find these arguments. And I will just say, these are not fringe, wacko arguments. They are from very responsible, highly trained, qualified individuals. So you take it for what it's worth. So depopulation, but in the meantime, you got to distract, you got to dumb down. So, lots of drugs, lots of video, lots of virtual reality, keep people, occupied with just dumb down their reality. So that's, I think, a big part, and you have to lie. You can't tell the world honestly what you're doing. You can't say, well, yeah, we're going to create this 24/7 lockdown surveillance state because we need to control you because we know you're going to be really pissed off in about 10 years when you lose your job, which is really what it's about. So they'll say, because safety, because we have to stay safe. So we have to control you. So anyway, it's all about the transformation of human society and culture. And the AI part of it that we're experiencing now is, well, it is a part of it. And as I say at the bottom, to conform with the new digital infrastructure. I've developed a theory. I don't know how detailed a theory it is, but I think it's a true theory, which I call the stages of humanity. And I believe that up until just about now, we've had 3 fundamental stages or forms of human existence that we've ever had. On the far left there is an image of hunters and gatherers. That's something that we've done literally for hundreds of thousands, I would even say millions of years if you want to include our direct ancestors, species like Homo erectus, and that goes back 2 million years. Homo erectus didn't look that different from us. They basically had our bodies. If you were to look them in a distance, they would look human. The faces looked a little different, but they were basically early versions of us. And that's 2 million years. And that means going out with a spear and getting a big animal and you drag it back to your camp, or gathering vegetables and fruits and things like that, and just living and being a nomad. And we did that for nearly all of our existence. If you go to the big timeline of that, that takes up 99+% of it, that form of existence. That's really what we are. About 10,000 years ago, which is not a long time ago, we began the process of domesticating animals and plants. I mean, really, that's what we did. Cows, you're over with us now. We're going to pen you in and raise you. And yeah, we're going to cut you up and eat you later, but we'll feed you for now. Pigs, goats, same thing. Get over here. Chickens. So we learned to control other animals and plants. We changed their genetic structure. We domesticate them. We figured it out. We broke the game is actually what we did. We human beings broke the game, the video game of the world, with agriculture. And that gave us our civilization. That's stage 2. And it's an awesome stage. Roman Empire, Italian Renaissance, and everything else. An amazing flowering of our existence. And only the last couple of 100 years, we made the next leap, which is we discovered science. And we really unlocked the keys of the rational order of the universe. That's really what we've done, right? And so out of that, we gained even greater power over the world and over nature, which we take for granted. We just take it for granted. We're like, we're running the world, and that's how it should be. We have our pets, we have our birds in the cage, and that's kind of a good metaphor for what we do with the rest of the world, and we just run it. So now we're moving to the 4th stage, and these are some bullet points that I just put together as to what I think are the significant elements of this 4th stage. I'll just go through them if you can't see them that clearly. A global infrastructure integration. Let's just stop and ponder that. A global infrastructure integration. So that means where we are here in California, with every other part of the United States, with Canada, with Mexico, with Europe, with Japan, with all of Asia, with Africa. In other words, just-in-time manufacturing and all of the digital transactions that take place around the world instantaneously. This is incredible. This is an unbelievable thing, and we've just created this global, very sophisticated, wholly artificial infrastructure by which we extract minerals, trade resources, exchange currencies, and do all of this stuff. And so it's a global system. Along with that, big data collection. Well, if you're going to have an integrated global system, you're going to need to manage your data. You're going to need to know how much copper has been extracted over there, and how much of this has been taken, and what do these people think about their politicians over here? And it all gets collected. It all gets collected so it can be managed in a technocratic fashion, because that's really what we're moving into, a technocracy. That's literally what this is all about. Big data collection, meaning, and that's information control, because information is power. information is power and money and wealth. So that's important. That requires population surveillance and management, because you can't, this is not like the Wild West any longer. I'm a huge fan of ancient history and literature, and just like I think within the last year, I reread the Iliad by Homer. I love ancient literature. I read Gilgamesh 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. Again, beautiful recent translations that exist on that. And when you read these ancient pieces of literature and writing, you see like these individuals, they lived and thought in a completely different way than we do today, and they could never survive in our world with the way that they think. They were every bit as intelligent as we are, of course, in some ways more so, but they would not survive. I mean, we wouldn't survive a week in their world either, but I mean, we definitely would not, but they would not function well here either. And that's because this infrastructure that we've created, we're designed to serve the system. I wrote this for my website a couple of months ago. I wrote, "We serve the system." We tend to think that we create infrastructures to serve us, which we kind of do, but really I think what happens is we end up serving it. The infrastructure that you live in has its own inexorable needs that require a conformance to it, or you don't survive. If your infrastructure is in the wild jungles of Africa 1.5 million years ago, you have to conform with what it demands. Like that means you gotta fight off the animals, you gotta like do all of these things. It's pitiless, and it requires a certain kind of human being to survive there. Similarly, we created our own infrastructure to give us all these benefits like central air and all these other wonderful things, but it has its own requirements. And ultimately, the more sophisticated it becomes, the more integrated and that it is, and requires human beings who you can't just go off and do your own thing. You got to serve the system. So that's really what is actually happening. So it requires management of the population. You can say control, surveillance. This 4th stage that we're moving into now, massive employment transitions. I say transitions, I originally wrote loss, but let's say transition. And back in the 90s, I mentioned I did resumes for people. I lived in a town where Eastman Kodak ruled for a century. I did in the 90s when Kodak was downsizing massively. Oh my God, it was just hemorrhaging and became a ghost. I did resumes for hundreds and hundreds of Kodak people, going through the very difficult and sometimes almost impossible transition. It's like, you work at a company for 35 years. What do you do? Now you're 60 and they're saying goodbye. Oh, well, we can retrain you. Not really for a lot of these people. So it's a horrible, difficult transition that is happening. Another thing about the 4th stage of humanity that we're moving into is incredibly advanced warfare capabilities and incredibly advanced coercion capabilities. So warfare, in other words, killing people in an organized fashion, but coercion as in legal coercion and enforcement over your own population. Those capabilities have gone through the roof in all kinds of ways. So that's important. Another element of 4th stage is singularity, which we're waiting for it. It could very well happen. Definitely strong AI, which we are starting to see now. Certainly the language model of ChatGPT-4 is very impressive. I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, have tried it. It is quite impressive indeed. By the way, hopefully if I have time, I have a thumbnail of a YouTube video that I did less than a month ago where I talked to ChatGPT-4 about aliens. Yeah, I put a WTF on the thumbnail because but the good news for me is that it's still not better than me on UFOs. This year, it's not better. One day, someone's going to program GPT to say, I want you to talk just like Richard Dolan and do his analysis. At some point, it's probably going to do it. But right now, I feel like John Henry. Remember the John Henry story? The railroads are coming in. It's 200 years ago. And back in the earliest railroad days, you got the big tough guys with the big hammers, and they're slamming down on the railroad spikes. But then comes a a railroad machine to do that work. And John Henry was a big, tough guy. He said, I'm better than those machines. And he has a competition against the machine. And he does win, but he dies of a heart attack at the end of it. So that's the legend of John Henry. I feel like we're all kind of feeling that right now. Anyway, I have my concerns. Let's keep going here with fourth stage of humanity, brain-computer interfaces, BCI. Elon Musk just got Neuralink approved by the FDA for, I think, certain trials or implementation. I don't know all the details, but that is moving forward. What is a brain-computer interface? It's a wire through your skull into your brain. That's what or wires that will allow you to interface with your computer, whatever device, and also, not just that. I mean, the true upside is physical ailments, like if you have paralysis, if you can't walk. They're talking about using this to help people walk. And in fact, I believe they are having at least some significant success with that. And so if you've got a significant neurological or physiological ailment and a brain-computer interface can help you with that, well, who's going to say that's a bad thing? It's obviously a wonderful thing for anyone who's got something like that. So, of course, then there's the other side of it, the downside of it. How far can this go in terms of mind control? Obviously, that's the obvious question. If they're saying, well, you can use it to think at your computer and it will respond. Well, it's kind of nice, but do you really need that? I mean, after all, if data can go out, can data come in? And particularly, with a strong AI potentially managing the process. One thing that has to be said about AI, because I don't know if I'll have enough time, I'll say it here. When I did my talk with GPT about aliens, what I noticed is that, yes, it's a very, very sophisticated language model. It's very good at what it does, but it's also very restricted. Doesn't like to do conspiracy theories. Doesn't like to do that, let alone hate speech, however that is loosely defined. Let's not even go there. But conspiracy theories, well, it's kind of like what I do, isn't it? So I wanted to ask ChatGPT about the UFO cover-up and UFO conspiracies and things like this. And the gymnastics I had to go through to get it to respond to my questions were pretty interesting, and that was the main part of the video that I put up on YouTube. It was very clear that AI and ChatGPT have significant pro-establishment points of view that it will just always bring in. And by the way, Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI, just attended the Bilderberg meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was there. Now, I don't know that he's necessarily definitely on the dark side, but he was at the Bilderberg meeting. So they're grooming him. Yeah. So that should tell us they certainly recognize the importance of these language model AI, and they want to make sure they bring him into the fold and make sure he's towing the line. So AI is going to be very significant potentially as an enforcer of what you're supposed to think, of the ideological conformity. All right, let me move on. So then there's biological manipulation of the fourth stage of humanity. In other words, genetic modification and genetic engineering. That'll be interesting to see where that goes. Just consider, there's 2 directions I could see that going. One is centralized control, and one is complete people just doing what they want. So in other words, one possibility is the state will find a way to enforce a narrative and laws to control the ability for each of us to do genetic modification. However they do that, they'll find a way. They'll say, you can't just let people do whatever they want. Things will get crazy. Or the converse will be, that will be impossible to contain, because you'll have people saying, I want my child not to have a disadvantage intellectually against my neighbors, who I know are doing some kind of crazy thing to get themselves a smart designer baby. I want my baby to be smart. You can see that happening. And so, and now there's a whole movement to create artificial wombs so that, sorry, ladies, you're not going to be the only ones necessarily that can be a mother to give birth. This, and it's being promoted as, well, it's liberating. Women shouldn't have to give birth. Yeah, right, shaking your heads. Because, first of all, not a woman, but hey, I have a mother, I have sisters, I have a daughter, and it's a, you know, I mean, you don't have to be a woman to know it's a deep defining characteristic of what it means to be a woman. You give birth. Well, we're creating artificial wombs. We're denaturing ourselves. But here's the one genetic advantage of an artificial womb. You think about gray aliens with the big heads. They're clearly not giving birth to themselves. I mean, really. Like, there cannot be a female gray alien that can fit those big heads through her birth canal. It is literally not possible. So there has to be artificial wombs for them, and I think we are, in fact, this is not the last we've seen of artificial wombs. I think that's coming. So with all the biological manipulation, you can kind of see people wanting to select for greater and greater intelligence, and to do that might require larger brains, might not. Maybe you could get away with a better organization of the brain, more dense neurological activity in the brain, which is what we have compared with some of our other Homo relations, like Neanderthals and others. We have more densely packed neurons. But at some point, you might see larger heads. And if they're a lot larger, I mean, this is very well understood by biologists. Like, our heads are about as large as they can be for an actual childbirth to occur. I mean, we've hit the limit. But if we get larger heads, we'll need artificial wombs. Anyway, let's keep going. All of those changes, I'm sure, will require a human psychological transformation. We won't be able to be, even like we are today, in a future society with all of these changes that I'm looking at. And I'm sure there's many others that'll be coming, but this is enough to show, like, we're going to have a massive psychological transformation, what I sometimes will call like a hive mentality, which is what we often describe the Greys and other aliens as having, a kind of hive mentality. I do think that may be a natural development of this stage of existence. I hope I'm wrong. The bottom bullet, I call it denaturing human nature. So let's move away from that. So that's what we are moving to, in my opinion. Let me talk about aliens, alien motivations. What are they all about? Because this lecture was meant to be about AI and aliens, and ET. So one thing that I have been very interested in reassessing is how long have they been here? I talked about this in, I think, one or even maybe both of my lectures here. I can't remember. And I'm not here to say that there hasn't been a long-standing presence. I actually believe there has been a long-standing presence of some other being here. But this is a very important question for us, actually, I would say, to look at critically. Because what I don't like is when people in this field reflexively will say, oh, they've been here forever. And the reason I don't like it is because it's really sloppy. I mean, and I love Gary Nolan, but he said it the other week in his interview. Oh, they've been here forever. And no one really questions that. But I'm going to question it in a sense. And the question is more important than we realize. Of course, that's a scene from Space Odyssey, or at least an adaptation of it. Pretty cool. Great movie. When you look at the ancient records of UFO sightings, I would say that the evidence is not as overwhelming as we like to think. I'm just going to put it right out there. I'm just going to say it. There is, in my book, The Alien Agendas, I do openly state that I believe we were very possibly genetically modified in our past. If I were to redo that book today, only 2 years later, I would probably redo that section. Not that I don't think we were genetically modified, but I think the exact example I gave might not stand up. I'm looking at it now thinking, I'm not sure I agree. But I do think that there is a very good case to be made that an intelligence saw us in the ancient past and said, we're going to do something for these group right here. and we're going to, because they're almost at the level, they're not there, we're going to bring them up. I actually think that is entirely possible. But when I look at the stories of ancient UFO sightings, this is an image of the Emperor Constantine in ancient Rome. In a way, it's a bad example. I mean, no one really believes that Constantine saw an actual UFO. What happened in, this is prior to the year 300 AD, Constantine was one of 4 mini emperors of the Roman Empire at the time that was vying for total control. It's like mafia wars. That's really what it was like. He ended up winning, and he became the Roman emperor. During the course of those battles, at one point, a sign, a portent, arose in the sky, a Christian symbol. I don't think it was a cross, but anyway, and there were supposed to be words in the clouds that said, "In this sign, conquer," and it was, this great thing to kind of motivate his men to win the battle. It has every mark of a myth that was just thrown on top of a battle to justify or to legitimize his rule. And that is what I believe it was. You find this with a lot of ancient sightings, by the way. There's a lot of, you can see very obvious social or religious or political motivations in the sightings themselves, which really should make us very suspicious of their legitimacy. I mean, I think we just have to be critically minded. I've looked at a lot of ancient sightings in the book Wonders in the Sky by Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck. Fantastic book. I love them both. They're both brilliant. But I think a lot of the evidence they put in there is, in my opinion, kind of weak. I got to say kind of weak. But not all of it. This is an early sighting that I go back and forth on. I think it's a good one. This is from Russia in 1663, a town that no longer exists, called, at the time, was called Robo-Zero. It's northwest of Moscow. And I think it's by a different name now, or it's a different, I don't even know if that exists in any form. It's an interesting case, though. What you found is in a monastery, about 150 years later, around 1801 or 1802, a letter was found from 1663. And it was a letter that described an unbelievable event that occurred over this town where there was a church service happening. And it was a fiery thing that comes over the town, shines light down on the water. Fish died, we were told. Fishermen who were out there got burned. The light goes away, then it comes back, then it goes away and comes back a third time. And all the people in the church came out and they watched it. And a local priest wrote about this to his bishop, asking for advice. What else do you do? So I read that, but now that's a good one, and you think, well, what's the motivation for these people to lie? And it's Russia, 1663, it's total backwater. Can we see motivations here? Actually, you can see a motivation, because when you look even here into Russian history at this time, there was a very, very significant religious schism that had just broken out in the 1650s. And it was a schism of the Russian Orthodox Church versus what were called the Old Believers. And I don't want to get into the whole thing, but basically the Russian Orthodox Church took on a doctrine that was identical with the Greek Orthodox Church in the 1650s. And as you can imagine, a lot of Russians were like, we don't like this. We're the Old Believers. There are Old Believers to this day, by the way, in Russia. But the point was, this was a significant, major theological battle that was growing in Russia at the time, and particularly in the Moscow region, where this was not far from Moscow. And so I just wonder, could this have been it certainly was interpreted theologically, I have no doubt, either pro or against the new theology. God is angry, God supports, whatever. But it does make me wonder, did it even happen? I don't know. I think maybe something did happen. Does that mean it's aliens and UFOs? The problem with these ancient reports is that they are just not written the way you'd like them to be written from a UFO point of view. They just are not. The details are almost always missing. It's very difficult to know what you're dealing with in most of these cases. And in none of the ancient cases that are halfway believable are there any descriptions of mechanical craft. I mean, the believable ones, in my view. So it's tough to know. Having said all of that, yes, I think whoever they are, there is a they component that has been here for a long time. If I have time in the next 45 minutes, I think I can get to some of it. You do got stronger evidence. By the way, there's a reason I'm doing this right now. You'll see in a moment. Because we're trying to get a handle on when this phenomenon became a big, big, big thing in our world. Like a noticeable thing. So this is a case from London in 1742. This is a stronger case for sure. Man writes, he says, I saw a light arise from behind the trees and houses, which I took at first for a large sky rocket. What he meant by that is fireworks. There were fireworks, very primitive fireworks at the time in England. I'll discuss that in a second. He said, but when it has risen to the height of about 20 degrees, it took a motion nearly parallel to the horizon, but waved in this manner. And you can see the wavy line. So it's horizontal waving. Now that's interesting. And he said, its motion was so very slow that I had it above half a minute in view, and therefore time enough to contemplate its appearance fully. This was published in a publication called Philosophical Transactions, a very serious publication in Britain. So for the record, fireworks did exist, but they were totally like shoot them up and they come straight back down to earth. There was nothing complicated about them. They didn't go up and then take a right angle turn and move in a horizontal fashion in a wavy line. Absolutely did not. Similarly, balloons were not invented for another 40 years after this. Could not have been a balloon. There really isn't anything that anyone can think of that would be a natural explanation for what this man saw. And you know, when you read what he writes, there's no attempt to tie this to political events or anything like that. There's no moral lesson here. He's just observing. So I very strongly tend to believe this, and there is nothing I can think of that would explain it conventionally. So I take this as a UFO or UAP. I wrote about this case in my USO lecture, if some of you were there. This is a fascinating event. I'm just briefly mentioning a British ship in the Pacific off the coast of Hawaii, but out at sea, 1825, 3:30 in the morning, an object comes out of the ocean, drops back down into the ocean, and then comes out of the ocean a second time. And the man on board was a naturalist by the name of Andrew Bloxham in 1825, and he writes about that. He says, you know, you could have found a pin on the floor of the deck. That's how bright this thing was, he said, at 3:30 a.m. I cannot, again, this is another witness where there's clearly no reason to think that he's making this up in any way whatsoever. It's a totally inexplicable phenomenon, and I can't see this as ball lightning or anything naturalistic. So that's an interesting case. That's 1825. But through the 19th century, and I'll just say of late, in the last year, I've spent a lot of time looking into really good 19th century and early 20th century UFO cases. I haven't really published anything other than on my website about that, but it's quite fascinating. But you really do get the explosion in the 1940s, as we all kind of know. Photographs, massive numbers of reports, really centering around the Second World War. Yeah, there were good sightings, some in the 30s and in the 20s, that we now know of, but you get a massive explosion during the Second World War. To me, this is the great signifier of something different happening. So that's important to keep in mind. The other question when we're talking about how long have they been here is, well, how many types are there? Are we dealing with one type of alien? Or are we dealing with multiple types of alien? Well, I think we recognize, at least in our research, that there are multiple types. So that is significant because, again, when we're talking about alien motivations for being here, I think we should ask, well, which aliens are we talking about? This is very difficult because we're still at a great disadvantage in getting our information. They're not just coming out and giving us a book about their history or showing us things. We have to figure this out, and it's difficult because sometimes they're doing things that make it explicitly difficult. So how many types is obviously a very important question because it affects their intentions and their motivations. And I think it's a very high likelihood that we're dealing with more than one type. I'll go on. Are they responsible for our tech explosion? I think overall, in the long term, I think they are minimally, at most, responsible for our tech explosion. Although I will definitely say, through crash retrievals, which we were just talking about earlier, of course, yes, I think that they have been absolutely responsible for a significant boost in our technological knowledge and prowess and ability. You can really see, though, that for most of human history, where we are today is a very natural progression of where we have come from. That man on the left is Charles Babbage. He was really the inventor of computers. He lived in the 19th century. He was a genius, and he figured out a lot of the basics that we have used ever since for creating. There's Alan Turing in the center, of course, a great genius, and early computers of the 1950s and so on. It's not difficult to see that there has been a natural progression in computing. Similarly with warfare. One thing that is very loud and clear for me relating to human beings is that we're not just a warlike species. That's not even beginning to describe us. We became what we are because of warfare. We became what we are because we, as a species, engage in collective aggression as a unit against other groups. We're the apex predators of our world, and so who else do we compete with? Well, we compete with ourselves. It's all about territory, all about collecting resources, and when there's another group over there that's impinging on our resources, well, the hell with them, we're going to go to war. Chimpanzees do the same thing, of course. They're some of the nastiest creatures in the animal kingdom. They go to war regularly. They are intensely territorial. We diverged from a common ancestor from them 7 million years ago. I have a feeling we have always been like this. We're aggressive. And so, as a result of that, we're not just aggressive with ourselves, but we're aggressive with animal species. And so our propensity for territorial acquisition and collective aggression, I do believe, has naturally been one of the great drivers of our technology, from spears to sophisticated metallurgy to gunpowder to what we have today. I believe now that if an alien intelligence were observing us 200,000 years ago and looking at that man on the left, that they could have predicted at some point, good chance that you'd end up with the guy on the right. When would that timeline be? How long? Well, I don't know if they could have predicted that, but took a few 100,000 years, but we got there. And I do think that these are inherently logical progressions. Same with science. And really, to me, by the way, if you look at those numbers on the bottom I put down, I didn't put them in years. I put them in generations. A generation being about 25 years. We invented writing about 250 generations ago. It's not that long ago when you think of it that way. Like if you think of us as lab animals, 215 generations. That's 25 years being one generation, which is what most biologists consider. Even in ancient times, apparently. I would have thought a fewer number of years, but no, they go by 25. Anyway, that's cuneiform from, I think, about 5,000 years ago. The reason and there's Euclidean geometry, and then there's Newton's Principia, with calculus, and the Apollo rocket of just 2 generations ago, 50 years. What I say is, once we learned to export information through language, it is believed, by the way, that we developed complex language with complex grammar only about 50,000 years ago. Maybe it was a little longer, but I don't think much. I had the pleasure just the other night to chat briefly with Graham Hancock about this, and I think he agrees. He thinks, we've been sophisticated for a bit longer than that, but I think in terms of sophisticated language, it is understood. It's been about 50,000 years. And that's important because that coincides with the artistic explosion in caves, music, and the like. Ritual, very probably also starting all around this time. It's like when the light bulb went on in our brain. Why? Because we were able to communicate ideas with other people. So 2 heads are better than 1. 15 brains are better than 2. And that's what language allowed us to do. So we were able to exponentially increase our intellectual capacity. And that's really, I think, that led to mathematics, that led to Newton, that led to the Apollo rocket, particularly when we started being able to write this stuff down. I think that just supercharged our intellectual development. So I guess what I'm saying is we didn't need aliens for that once we got language. This is my current belief on the matter. I think their presence here, their massive presence, the presence that we've seen and noticed since the Second World War, is probably connected to our development as a species. I've thought this for a while. You see significant sightings starting in the 19th century, major escalation in the 20th. I write, undoubtedly Earth itself is important. Now, here's the question. I think I have this as a slide in here. Well, let me move on. Yeah, I'll get to my point. So I think we can speak of stages of an alien presence on our planet. This is why I don't like when someone says they've been here all along. I think it's a lot more specific than that. So I think stage one, and again, I'm just working this all out, so I might think differently next year. But a long-standing, perhaps low-level presence, possible genetic manipulation. And by the way, I think that stage, the individuals interacting with us, if at all, I think probably looked human, just like us. I think there's been a long-standing human-looking interaction. I'll get back to that. Stage two, starting maybe in the 18th or 19th century, going to the early 20th century, where we see possibly increased activity. I think so. And then stage three, you get from really the middle of the 20th century, World War II, where it just becomes this massive global phenomenon that we see it everywhere. If that's true, then you might think urgency is important to these beings who are here now, because they would know that we are going through a period of rapid change ourselves as a civilization. I mean, we are radically different than we were 100 or 200 years ago. 100 years ago was only 4 generations. 4 generations, not long. 200 years is just 8 generations. So in a very brief period of time, we have already gone through massive changes, and they would realize this. And so they might be thinking, in another generation or two, these humans are going to be seriously powerful, and maybe we can still take them in a street fight, but they might actually be they're coming up to our level. I've been talking like this for a long time. I've been saying I don't think progress goes in a straight linear way. I don't believe that. I think it goes in leaps. That's why I talk about these stages, stage 1, stage 2. I think they're qualitative leaps. It's like, I'm not a chemist, but you got valences of the atom, and the electrons can leap. You go from one to another. You've got very definite areas or realms where the electrons are. And I think perhaps civilization might work in a similar way. So they know we're about to leap right into their world. We've got 2, at least in recent human history, 2 incredible developments happening at the same time. Our exploitation of science, that's bringing us to this stage now, and a massive ET arrival. Again, they've been here. Some of them, whatever they are, have been here a long time, but not all of them. There's no record, for example, of gray aliens that I'm finding convincing. I know there are alleged, I saw some Mexican petroglyphs just this weekend of beings that look like gray aliens. And I'm open to an investigation of that, but I'm not yet convinced that they're all legit. Maybe they are. We will see. In terms of actual strong evidence of gray aliens, I'm still waiting for that. And I think that we really haven't seen it until the middle of the 20th century. That's my take on it. So I don't think it's a coincidence that our exploitation of science has happened essentially roughly at the same time that a significant influx of ETs is being noticed here. I think it's actually the same. I'll ask a little about these aliens. This is some AI artwork I tried out. Didn't look too bad. But here's a question I will ask you about aliens. Were they, I mean, if they developed on another planet, that's the big if, people say, well, they're interdimensional or whatever, but I still have a hard time understanding how that would work. I'm going to be honest with you. To me, the simplest explanation is that they are from another planet. And I'm going to go with that as an assumption here, so just bear with me. If they were from another planet, were they apex predators like we are? Well, I'm going to say probably they were. We got to a point where we just dominate our world. We take it for granted, like I was saying, and we run things here. They probably ran things there. That would mean they had their own innate aggression, and they may not be overtly aggressive now, but I would probably assume if they were apex predators, they're used to having their own way. And that's something as well. So what are they like now? Well, have they gone through their fourth stage? I think absolutely they have. Maybe there's a fifth stage beyond that and a sixth stage, who knows? But are they artificial? By which I mean, are they enhanced? Sure they are. As I said earlier, the size of the brain and head is a dead giveaway. You cannot birth this creature if you are a creature like that. I just can't see how it's possible. They've got to be artificial. So the question is, will we become like them? On the far left is a recreation of a species, early Homo species, Homo heidelbergensis. They lived about a little less than 1 million years ago. Look kind of like us, basically. And on the third guy there is an artist's rendition of a potential future human. They think our eyes are going to get bigger. I don't know why they think that, but they do. There's thoughts, too, that our jaws will become weaker and our teeth will become weaker and our thumbs are, yeah. Yeah, there actually was a recent artist rendition of a future, I think it was a woman 1,000 years from now, and it's horrible. She's bent over, long arms, and she's holding a cell phone like this. Really, I mean, I don't know why they picked on women for that. It could have been a guy too, but anyway, I doubt that will be accurate. I think we're going to have other types of enhancements. But anyway, the question is, will we become like them? Will we become artificial as well? And I think, I ask at the bottom here, are there natural inherent forces that apply everywhere? In other words, to all life forms. Again, I was saying, you serve the system you're in. You serve the environment you're in. You have to adapt to the environment that you're in. And if you create that environment, you still have to adapt to it. So I think it would require certain biological and psychological changes. Just like these greys have had, so too we will have. And if we create an environment similar to them, we are very likely going to become similar to them. It's called convergent evolution. You can acquire characteristics like another species even if you're not related to them, because the conditions within which you live are similar to the conditions within which they live. That's called convergent evolution. So think about it. We will have an extremely advanced science and technology like them. Will that require a hive mind like them? Physical atrophy in various ways? Probably yes. Highly rationalized social structure? Check. Probably, I'm going to guess, very centralized for optimal control and management of resources and people? Yes. Genetic manipulations, and probable the use of very strong AI. I think all of that is likely things that we will share with any visiting species that are here now. Here's a question in the time that I've got before we hit the press conference. Can we assess their current behavior in order to gauge their intentions? This is something that the UFO community needs to do more. These are 8 points that I find significant about what is observable and factual. 1, thousands of sightings around the world every year. 2, the big push for this apparently starting around the 1940s. 3, they are seen in nearly every environment: space, atmosphere, land, water, urban areas, rural, mountains, desert. There's no place where they are not. 4, including many late-night residential hovering activities. This is a significant subset that I'm very interested in. You go to the National UFO Reporting Center. I'm a big fan of that site. And you will find, not every case, not even every 10th case, but enough where someone will say, I woke up at 2 in the morning and I went outside and I saw a black object. I almost didn't see it, hovering over my neighbor's house at 200 feet altitude. What is it doing there? What is that? Easy to miss, but they're there. So that's an activity that's important. 5, interest in military technology and activities. That's obvious. 6, elusive, unwilling to reveal themselves, at least most of the time, it seems. 7, many claims of alien abduction. 8, possibility of hybrids. Well, yeah, when you go through the literature, especially abduction literature, you get stories of hybrids. Many of them on ships, allegedly. Admittedly, I don't know if we've seen them walking around. There are some people who claim to be hybrids. Maybe they are. I don't know about that. But there are definitely some, in my opinion, reasonably decent claims of this through abduction research and claims that they even walk among us. Hey, in my time in this field, I've had a few people who have approached me and discussed their encounters with human-looking beings that they were convinced were totally telepathic and not from here. I'm not the only one who's gotten those stories. So to infer certain conclusions, this is what I would say, based on the previous 8 things that I just stated. 1, we got their attention somehow. We got their attention. Somehow the word got out, maybe, that human beings had achieved science. And they came here just in time to see us drop a couple of atomic bombs. 2, they have used a significant investment of their own resources to be here. We got to remember that. They have a worldwide presence. That is not a trivial amount of resource investment on their part. So this, I would have to conclude, is important to them. 3, outstanding technology, outstanding scientific knowledge. That's obvious on every level. 4, they are interested in human beings, specifically, but probably also Earth resources. I say this, I've been doing research on USOs, that's underwater, unidentified submersible objects. I am doing a book on it. I have a lot written on it, I have a lot more to go. But what I get from that is they have a lot going on in the oceans. And I don't know that all of that or much of that has to do with us. They might just be living there for all I know. So I think it's not just humanity that is interesting to them, but our world, which is an incredible world. I made a big pitch for that in one of the panels I did the other night. I just think we don't always appreciate how incredible Earth is. Yes, we know there's life elsewhere, but there's life and then there's life on Earth. I mean, we have life in the oceans, life in the jungles and forests. We have life on the poles. We have life everywhere. We have an incredibly amazing amount of life teeming all over the place here. And you got to think, if an alien species finds us, they might think this is incredible. The amount here is off the charts. It might be. It might be. And that might make it even more interesting to them. They are interested in tracking our technological development. I don't think there's any question about that. They are interested in taking our biological samples. And so you have to wonder, is there infiltration and or control going on? I'm sure that coffee is not for me. It is for me? Well, that's absolutely wonderful. I thank you kindly. I was kind of thinking there's a telepathic connection. This is why you marry people. It's all about the telepathy.
We're kind of off-roading today, right? You're doing the
We're
double.
totally off-roading.
You're doing the double.
I'm doing the double. Thank you very much, my beautiful. And the last thing I would just say is they are unwilling or unable to communicate with us. I see Danny here. When are we going to wrap this up? Just tell me the truth.
They'll come up live at 3 o'clock.
All right, so I already did my breakdown of the early stuff of the article. I'm done with that. I'm doing what I was supposed to do before I was so rudely interrupted by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. So I'm going to wrap this up, and we're going to switch gears. And I think we're going to switch computers as well. So that our tech masters, the tech lords will come in, they'll bring a new computer, and we're going to watch the thing. Let me just keep going. Why? This is a slide I added this morning. Why have they not openly taken over? Why have they not done that? Do we even ask this very much? Like, it's a super important. Let me have a sip of this coffee first. This is only my second cup of the day. I feel deprived. Why have they not done this? This may be the last slide that we have time for. Because you think it would have been extremely easy in the past, wouldn't it? I mean, even 200 years ago, 300, 400, 500 years ago, 1,000, 5,000 years ago, it would have been cakewalk. And yet it doesn't appear to have happened. There's nothing in the archaeological evidence that shows a major disruption of that sort. It just seems like we've had our development. There have been others that may have been here, but they didn't just say, you know, we like this planet a lot and we're just going to move you out. I mean, we know this is what human beings would have done. Like, I mean, we absolutely would have done it. If we got to another world and we find another world, even if there's an intelligent life form that's a much more primitive level, do you really think we're going to have the qualms about saying, well, we really think you're neat, but you also have a lot of gold here, and you have a lot of minerals and resources, and we're just going to do this. Like, we would not hesitate to take it. But yet, there has been others that appear to have been observing us, and they have not done that. And that's a really good question. My only theory, well, first of all, my second bullet here is maybe they did, and we are them. Maybe that's what happened. They came here, and they thought, these beings, they're a little primitive, but they got potential. Let's tweak them and let them do their thing. That could very well be the case, that we are a project. You know, Charles Fort 100 years ago thought the same thing. Maybe they can't openly take over for some reason. What might the reason be? Maybe biological incompatibility. But if so, you know, we get reports of hybrids being developed now. If that's true, then you would think they're preparing themselves so that they can live here. But if that's the case, has there only recently been a potentially aggressive species in the mix? So, in other words, this is what I think I currently believe, that there is a long-standing benign presence, but that in the last 200 years, the word got out that we've developed science, or the word got out somehow, and someone else or others were able to get here. And now we're seeing a very massive influx, including at least one potentially aggressive species. That's something that I actually think is a real possibility. Maybe they're not interested in taking over the joint, as my dad used to say. He liked that word. But if they're not interested in taking over, then you have to ask, why are there so many of them flying all over the world every day today? I mean, again, this is something that is not discussed in the UFO community, not nearly enough, is the amount of activity that takes place every single day around the world. By my estimate, and I agree, I'm just, giving a rough estimate, but in my lecture the other day, I thought minimum probably 40,000 good sightings every year. And I don't think that's outrageous. And it could be vastly more activity than that. So they're everywhere, and yet they're not taking over. What are they doing? They're just living here? Maybe that's what they're doing. They're just living in the oceans or living in the way that they see fit. I'm going to end this in 2 or 3 minutes, and then we will switch gears. Can they live here as they are? If we're talking gray aliens, can they just live here as they are, or would they need to adapt? I think the answer is they need to adapt. Therefore, is hybridization real? Well, if you go through abduction literature, it's a tricky question. Someone asked me this over the weekend, do you believe in hybrids? And I really had to stop and think, because the knee-jerk reaction is, oh yes, absolutely, of course. But I've never seen a hybrid, at least not knowingly. And it's a tough one to answer, to be really honest and rigorous about it. But I think we can say yes if we credit abduction research. And I'm not willing to discredit it yet. So if that is the case, hybrids are here. Why are they here? The only reason I can think is that it's for them to turn themselves into something that can be compatible with Earth's environment. And if that's the case, that means they want to live here. An easier solution is you just breed your own humans, which I do think is also part of the case. All of these cases of human-looking entities, I don't think they evolved on other planets. I don't think they look identical to us, having evolved elsewhere. So we're going to end it up. So this is it. I was going to talk about Ingo. I was going to talk about some earlier stuff, but we can't We can't because we have news to deal with. So let's take a break and switch gears. All right, goody. Let's do this.
Good. You want to grab your thing?
Do it to it.
Thanks for accommodating.
Good dogs have bad days. That coming from the U.S. Postal Service is they are trying to bring awareness to dogs that bite the mailman. The agency says more than 5,300 mail carriers were attacked last year, which is slightly down from 5,400 in 2021. Why this matters, in addition to if you're a mail carrier and get bit by a dog, if a carrier feels unsafe, mail service can be halted for the entire neighborhood until the dog is properly restrained. Your name is closest to mailman.
It is. So I am the mailman, so I'm going to defend my brothers and sisters of the U.S. mail. You said mail carriers. It's very, PC. But we go with mailman in this household. And, yeah, you should restrain your dog. I mean, these mailmen, they have to be in the rain, in the snow. Now they have to get bitten. It's terrible.
Yeah, but it's a dog's life, though. Yeah. And I want to announce on this show...
And a dog's world.
I've been retained by the National Society of Dogs. We're going to unionize them. We're going to meet with the UPS.
All right. The dog union is where we leave the show. That is The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. Elizabeth Vargas Reports starts from New York right now.
Bombshell claims from a military whistleblower. UFO wreckage recovered by the U.S. kept classified by a secret government program for decades. Tonight, a world television exclusive you will only see on News Nation. Welcome to Elizabeth Vargas Reports, earning your trust every night. UFOs exist. The U.S. government found quite a number of them, and they are indeed of non-human origin. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously. 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grush is exposing what he calls a top-secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grush's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a world television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of it secret from Congress and from the public. News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is here with the story, and this is a blockbuster.
It is a blockbuster. It's really hard to wrap your mind around this. I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I'm still having a hard time processing all of it. Over the last couple of years, it sort of became mainstream to discuss UFOs. The government has released videos. They've acknowledged that we don't know what some of this stuff is out there that we have on camera, but this really takes it all to another level. For the very first time, the world is about to hear from a former high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. He is revealing these exclusive details about the secret government program.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
We have all seen these blurry videos of unidentified flying objects. Video evidence, if you will, that old tales of UFOs may not all be conspiracy theories. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And now in a News Nation exclusive, David Grush, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, and veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the U.S. defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets
Yes.
Grush sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for News Nation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grush alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General. News Nation has confirmed David Grush's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the U.S. government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
It's also harder for people to wrap their minds around the concept of a crashed object from somewhere else. It's easier to accept that, yeah, we see things in the sky that we can't explain.
Journalist Leslie Kean broke Grush's whistleblower story this morning in the debrief. Ms. Kean's career has been mainstream and credible, having written a series of reports on UFOs in the New York Times dating back to 2017. He has the credentials, but there's no documents that he's handed over. There's no pictures. And as a journalist, you want to see documents, you want to see pictures. Does that raise a red flag?
Not at all, Brian. I mean, you mean documents that actually describe the craft?
Correct, yeah, like government documents, or to be able to see it for ourselves.
Of course, don't we all want that? And the problem with that is all of that information is classified. You know, as we said in the story, everything that Grush told Congress and told the Inspector General of both the IC, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and the Department of Defense Inspector General, all of that information is classified.
In 2017, Kean reported exclusively in the New York Times that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. 3 years later, the Pentagon confirmed her story. Her latest report is even more explosive, but Kean says she has multiple sources who back up Grush's story.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other to make something like this up.
So I've got to be blunt about this. Yeah. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. Mm-hmm. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to News Nation about this report. They say to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. AARO's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and AARO welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grush, he's filed that whistleblower complaint. He's been on the record under oath testifying to many of these things that he said in our report tonight.
Right, and it's important to point out that this statement from the Pentagon, from AARO, Grush is alleging that this top secret program is keeping it a secret from AARO. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if Grush is, what he's saying is true, you know, the spokespeople, all of those folks at that level wouldn't even know this was going on anyway.
All right, I got to ask you, you know, he has a compelling story to tell. Very little of it seems like firsthand knowledge. Isn't he just repeating what somebody else has told him or somebody else has showed him?
Yes, that is what he's doing, but he says he's talked to a number of people who are in very, very high-level positions. He also had basically the highest level of classified material information that he was able to receive. We went back and checked over, you know, his history, all of his credentials, check out completely. Unfortunately, there's
in addition, a couple people have come forward publicly to vouch for him, people who are high-ranking.
They have, and this article first came out this morning, and I think it's interesting that, you know, there hasn't been any sort of effort to discredit what he has said either from the Defense Department.
So interesting. So what happens, you know, and have we had any reaction, by the way, from members of Congress who have been taking this seriously in the last couple of years? We've seen congressional hearings, we've seen NASA's hearing just about a week ago on UFOs or UAPs, whatever you prefer to call them. We've seen the DNI give a briefing to the White House on this. When we've been hearing whispers and rumors for years. I remember even former President Trump, when he was in office, sort of saying, oh my gosh, if you knew what I knew about UFOs.
Yeah.
So there's always been this intrigue.
There has, and think about it, Elizabeth, if you go back 15 or 20 years, if we were sitting here talking about UFOs, people would think that we were nutty. Now it's gotten to the level of where it is somewhat accepted because the government has come forward to a certain extent and acknowledged that there are these videos that exist. The Navy has released the videos themselves and said, we're not sure exactly what this is that we're seeing. Of course, what Grush is saying really just sort of takes it to the next level.
Boy, it sure does. It's almost impossible to believe. All right, Brian Nenton, thanks so much. And former Navy fighter pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves joins us now. He was the first active duty pilot to testify before Congress about his squadron's experience with UAPs. He also founded Americans for Safe Aerospace to encourage other pilots to come forward. Lieutenant Graves, always great to have you on the show. First, just your reaction to what we've just heard.
Yeah, quite the incredible statements that were made public today. David has had a lot of experience, and he's made some pretty strong statements. My understanding is that this has been properly communicated to Congress and other stakeholders in government, and so that really puts the onus now on Congress to be able to move this information forward, hopefully to the American people.
The whistleblower complaint alleges that not only has our government had these craft of, quote, non-human origin, but that it's keeping it secret. And for decades, the Air Force discredited sightings of UAPs by pilots like you. Does it sound possible to you that that kind of secrecy is still happening, this kind of disinformation, this time around aircraft?
Well, that just seems to be the case. I've been reporting on unidentified objects since 2014 and 2015 off of the coast of Virginia Beach. And still, that conversation hasn't elevated to the point where pilots still feel comfortable reporting. So, yes, I still believe that there is secrecy and stigma associated with this topic. And this conversation that we're having today, I think, is a massive step in the right direction.
Can you describe exactly what you saw when you were flying in the air that night?
Certainly. We were seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of clear spheres. And we were seeing these all over our working areas on a near daily basis, sometimes coming as close as 500 feet to our aircraft as we were flying our operations. We were seeing this not only off the eastern seaboard, but we were seeing this down south off Jacksonville, Florida, as well as off the west coast. Now, with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office reporting that we're seeing spheres globally that are proceeding from 0 to 2 Mach on a regular basis, we still haven't really figured out what those objects are.
And you, largely to your efforts and a few others, and people are now speaking out, pilots are now speaking out. But in general, especially a couple of years ago, but you say even now still to a certain extent, what are pilots told when they come back and say, oh my God, look at what I saw and what I recorded in my cockpit camera?
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't even get to that point, unfortunately, Elizabeth. Pilots aren't taking it back to their companies, to their safety offices and reporting this. Typically what I'm hearing from aircrew that are calling and reporting is that they're seeing objects. They're typically reporting it to air traffic control, and that's really where the conversation ends. There'll be a number of other aircraft that will report the same thing in the same vicinity, but there's no further action taken. It was a bit disappointing to hear the
Go ahead.
Hear the FAA chief talk. It was a little disappointing to hear the FAA representative at the latest public meeting that the NASA independent study team had stated that he was only familiar with maybe 4 or 5 reports of UAP from their FAA controllers. I'm personally hearing reports from pilots that they're seeing objects on almost a nightly basis off the Northern Pacific as well as Northern Atlantic.
Almost a nightly
and that's
basis?
been happening for several months. Yes.
Okay, if these non-human craft are in fact flying around the Earth on almost a nightly basis, would it make sense to you that one or more of these would crash or land?
Well, that's the assumption that we have to make if David's story is 100% true. If these objects are flying around, that have been for a number of years, the assumption would be that they would likely crash at some point and that there would be an operation to retrieve it.
A former staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee is publicly calling on the government to reveal what it has. He says he's spoken to 4 witnesses who say the same thing that you do, that Grush says, that we have material from non-human craft, and he writes, we must know the facts concealing such vital information. If we are not alone, this poses a huge barrier to successfully adapting to the world around us. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Not only we're not able to adapt to the reality around us, but there's all sorts of potential concern for miscommunication or identification in war zones, potential safety hazards with air traffic, and just the reality that we're just not ready for something potentially if it is happening around us, if we're not willing to acknowledge it.
This former staff director also writes that there is a pattern, a persistent pattern of surveillance around Department of Defense test ranges and around nuclear sites. First, have you heard of that? And if so, wouldn't this also make this a matter of national security?
I have to insist that it does. These are being detected around training ranges and places of national security, such as nuclear facilities. Additionally, we can see that there is some level of repeatability and congregation of these objects in those areas, and that should be a cause for concern. Some of the work that we're doing at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is related around the detection and sensing of these objects, and there are patterns that can be pulled out, and we are seeing them conglomerate mostly around training ranges and military operation areas.
Do you believe Grush's claims?
It's not about trusting him. It's the fact that he's brought evidence forward that we can now go through and verify, and that's now in the hands of Congress to be able to go and verify that story. His story is believable, and I think it's now up to Congress to verify it and then communicate the results of that to the American people.
All right. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, always great to have you here. Thanks so much for weighing in on this. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Coming up, switching gears, former Vice President Mike Pence is throwing his hat into the race for president.
Whoa. First of all, can you hear this? That was live. That was all live. Everything, none of this is pre-recorded. A huge hand to the AV crew that moved a mountain to make this happen.
Great.
They're back there. That was amazing for being on the spot to make this all happen. That was just unbelievable. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
And
we just got
fascinating.
this morning that I've been in conversation with them during the morning, and we've been in conversation for a number of weeks, actually. That Dave actually went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and gave them this information from the 4th, 5th, and 6th of April. And then I'm not at liberty to talk about the details of this, but let me say, I knew this as of the 10th of April. And that this effort to try to get it put forward is part of how many of you were at the panel the other night?
Which panel?
The disclosure panel that we had, that we began talking about this at that time, that there was this effort on the part of some people inside the highest levels of government to get this information out, and there was a pushback. Susan Gao, who the quote, the big long quote you saw from them saying that they have no evidence that there's ever been any kind of craft recovered, etc. I mean, that's just a flat lie, and that's consistent with the program that they've had in place for like 75 years. It was like Oliver North in the Iran-Contra case when he just flat lied to Congress and said that no, there was no evidence whatsoever that we were secretly shipping weapons to the Contras, and he flat out lied under oath to Congress. And then when he got caught on it, that we actually, our office, the Romero Institute, that runs the New Paradigm project that we're working on here about all this, that when we got that exposed and the special prosecutor was appointed and dragged Oliver North in front of the Congress, he just said, well, sure, I lied to you. It was a covert program. You're not entitled to it. Like the executive branch is like the government, they think. Whereas the Congress of the United States, whom we elect, is the government. And so what you see here, you see live here today, Susan Gao from the Pentagon and the executive branch lying, saying that they have no evidence whatsoever about this. But you got David Grush now asserting not only the details of it, but he's provided to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence hundreds of pages of previously and still classified documents showing the details of this type of a program.
I just want to point out, this is a really good point you're making, that this is a battle, on one level, a battle between these two branches of government, where Congress has been really pushed to the side for such a long time, and with the growth of such executive power. But it is, I think, totally legit to see this in part as a battle between Congress and the executive.
It's a struggle, and for example, during the Iran-Contra case, when they were confronted about what they were doing, that Congress had passed a law totally prohibiting the executive branch, Defense Department, and any intelligence agencies from providing any military assistance to the Contras, the former, authoritarian fascist government down in Nicaragua that had been deposed and were caught by the international courts mining the harbors of them, which was a violation of international law, and they were declared international criminals. That government fell and went into exile, and the Congress passed a law, the Dolan Amendment, explicitly and emphatically prohibiting the Defense Department and any of the intelligence agencies, the executive branch, from providing any assistance to them. And when we caught them doing it and put them under oath, what Oliver North said is, well, wait a second, the Congress may have the authority to decide to control the purse strings of providing funds, but if we in the executive branch can get money somewhere else, we can do whatever we want. We can mount any kind of foreign policy that we want to. All they do is control the funding. And so that they went to the Brunei. They went to the Sultan of Brunei to get millions of dollars, and then just undertook an operation of their own. That's sort of what we see happening here, that the executive branch has been engaged in this kind of super covert program now for decades, and they've been lying flat out to Congress, and they're still lying to Congress. And so this is what you've seen live here today in this like 15 minutes that we've all witnessed together real time is what we've been talking about here all weekend. But it's happened right here, live today.
Totally unexpected.
Yeah.
Ruined my morning. I had a whole plan, and then they changed it. I think I got to wonder how Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick feels right now. He's like, those bastards sold me out. I mean, he really must feel pretty bad. After what he just said, no evidence of anything anomalous and so forth, and here we go with this.
It's not all that clear that he's been trying that hard. You know, that's one of the issues here. Later in the same article, for the detail that actually broke this first thing at dawn this morning, was that Chris Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, actually stated, he said, well, you know, the major problem is that the head of AARO, this fellow that we're talking about here, Sean Kirkpatrick, rightly or wrongly, just isn't trusted by the people who are trying to disclose all of this to believe that he really is intending on doing it. And I raised this at the panel, that the problem is that the people in the AARO office, they have not been given anywhere near an adequate budget. And in fact, they seem to be sitting in their office waiting to see if anybody comes through the door. And yet they've been charged with responsibility for getting this information, pulling this information out of the defense, the military departments, the Defense Department agencies, the intelligence agencies, and the private defense corporations, to extract this information from them and turn it over to the intelligence committees, the defense committees. And it's not at all clear that they perceive their job is really doing that. That they just perceive their job is to sit there and wait for somebody to come and tell them. So what we have happening here now is you have people who don't trust them going around that office and going directly to the intelligence committee itself and sharing the information directly with them, and then coming on national television and announcing that they've given it to them, to put the pressure on the AARO office to have to say, okay, I guess we better call him up. And get them in here. So that's what you see happening live. You can imagine, as we're here together, you can imagine what's going on in Washington, D.C. You know, they've turned off the cameras here on this particular program, but you can imagine that they're just scurrying all around inside the Pentagon now. They're all rushing back. Probably AARO's locking its doors to keep journalists from getting in there.
And you have to wonder, I mean, what we just saw was not mainstream. What we saw was I guess, I don't know, alternative, not really alternative news, but News Nation. So that's great that they did it. It's amazing. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of attention. There's no question. I mean, it was very professionally done, very well done. But you've got to wonder, is ABC going to take this? CNN, Fox? Like, when are they? They probably will have to cover it. I don't see how they can avoid this.
It's going to be very difficult.
It'll be very difficult. Yeah.
And Ross Galbraith, who did the interview, that I've been interviewed by Ross a number of times. He's very, very credible. We're in actual conversations. You guys are right in the real live action here. What's going on is that Mr. M, who came here to do a workshop, which nobody knew who he was. Turns out that it was in fact Leo Marini. Leo Marini is in the process right now of trying to get a series authorized through Amazon Prime to have weekly shows to talk about this. That we've been in dialogue with him for a long time. Steve Bassett is being put together.
He's
to
right over
have
there.
A separate show. There's Steve right over there. So there's all kinds of things happening right now. You are live. This is all coming to you live for coming here to the Contact in the Desert, and there's more that is going to be going on. In fact, we're going to get together after this over in the Atlantis room, for the intensive. Which is devoted to this. Okay, so you guys can all kind of just shally right on over there to the.
You're here all day, guys. You're not leaving.
Yeah, it ain't over yet.
So here's a question. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop for the rest of the media, because I was just saying, I don't know if you were here, but I believe that we've been looking at a battle of factions over the last 5.5 years. I've never believed that we're dealing from the beginning with one concerted CIA disinformation effort to get their own disclosure out. I've never felt that way. I've always believed that you've got a hardcore secrecy always faction, and you have another faction that believes in some level of disclosure. I'm not saying it's our level, but some level. They're still very establishment-oriented people. They still believe in national security secrets and things like that, but they want some level. And that's been the battle. And I have to think that is also reflected in their influence and domination over much of the media. So what I'm really wondering, it'll be interesting to see in the next few days how the rest of the media covers this.
It's important to know that I've been on the phones with them all morning, and it turns out that they did bring it to the New York Times first.
And the Post, Washington Post also, right?
After they went to the New York Times first, because there's Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who actually wrote the article along with Helene Cooper back in December of 2017. So they brought it there, and that, as you may have noted when I was on the panel, I was the one who got the telephone call when the Pentagon Papers got taken. They were brought to the New York Times, and Jim Goodell, who was the chief counsel of the New York Times and executive vice president, called on the phone to me. And we're the ones that choreographed that whole process of making the decision to publish these, even though they were classified. We knew that the Nixon administration was going to come at us. They were going to go to the federal courts and try to get an injunction to stop us from doing it. We went all through that process for 13 days. Finally got the right to publish those. We had the right to publish those from the beginning, but we got the court to recognize that. Okay, so that you're going to run into something like this here, because the people that are willing now to come forward, if you start getting news outlets that are willing to step forward on this and start to publish this information, even if the Aero Office hasn't done its job and gone out and gotten the information from them, and if they try to stop them, if they try to enforce their non-disclosure agreements or their security agreements against them, the Congress of the United States has passed a law saying you can't do that. You cannot enforce those security clearance agreements or their non-disclosure agreements against them any longer, pursuant to their right to come and tell this committee. So this is really quite an event that's happening here for us.
Hey, why don't we open this up? I see some people with their hands up. We want to have you answer some questions. I see there's a person in the back row. Oh, is that JJ?
Yes, JJ.
Hi. Can you just speak up loud? I don't know if we have microphones. Just. Well said. Thank you. Any other comment? Yes, you, sir. If you speak up as loudly as possible, would be great. We'll repeat it.
A lot of emphasis on their monitoring our defense facilities. Are we being teed up for a new forever war?
They're monitoring our defense. Are we? Repeat.
Are we gearing up for another forever war? You know, this has been a concern for some time. Dr. Stephen Greer, as you see, has gone on at some length, assuming all of that to be true. That what they're really doing is he's postulating that they have succeeded over time in actually back engineering some of these craft that they've recovered. And that they've discovered the secrets of the propulsion system, the navigation system, the anti-gravity system they function with, and that what they're doing is they're flying them around and test flying them, and they're going to pretend to have us invaded by an extraterrestrial species so that they can get money forever.
Blue beam, right.
Okay? And it's a classic false flag kind of operation. Is that I absolutely do not believe that.
I've never agreed with it either.
Yeah.
I do believe in false flags. I nearly wrote a book on it. There's a lot of them going on, but an alien invasion false flag, for all kinds of reasons, I've always seen problems with it. But I will say, If they tell us that we're being invaded by aliens, then I think that's going to be a false flag. If they actually tell us that. But earlier, when I was breaking down Leslie and Ralph's article, I just pointed out that in that article, there was a statement by, I can't remember the one gentleman's name. He was an intelligence person. He said, we need to maintain secrecy still. Because the technology is being weaponized not just by us but by other actors.
Jonathan Grano, I think they attributed to Jonathan Grano that they attributed to, I think. But anyway.
Yeah. I don't remember if that was his last name. But anyway, the point was he was really laying the groundwork, I thought, for we're going to give you some information, but we could still have to keep back secrets. So you can see this narrative is forming very quickly. Even from the pro-disclosure side of it, they are still trying to create a territory where they can maintain some level of secrecy because there's still so much of this subject. We're talking about acquired technology and possible alien bodies, but one thing that's not yet being discussed is what are they doing? Because there's sightings all over the world, hundreds, thousands every year, and that's not yet a matter of discussion. Maybe in time it will be.
Well, that's the question here, is that what are going to be the ripple effects of this information?
Right.
And many people believe that once the Pentagon had to acknowledge that UFOs were real and that they weren't swamp gas or, a misidentified flock of birds or something, that this moment that we're sharing here together was going to be inevitable. Yeah. That somebody was going to say, wait a second, if they're flying all around here and they're real, hasn't anybody ever recovered one of these things? And of course, that's what's happened now. Now that they've said this, they're going to, if they kick the tires and pound on David Grush, all they're going to find is absolute truth. This guy's telling the absolute truth. He's got the documented proof to show it. He knows the names of the people that have got all the firsthand information, and he's providing it to them.
There's another question over here, ma'am.
So my question is, there's a lot of people that are taking the information, and one of them is Bigelow. He's getting a lot of the reports that are coming in. How does he play into all of this?
Robert Bigelow. You have an inside info on,
on
Bigelow?
It's even a more generic question, and that is the Aero Office going to have any type of protocol to be able to get information from the citizenry, not just the military? What they've been instructed to do by the Congress that passed this law was to get the information out of all the military services, all the Defense Department agencies, all of the intelligence communities, and all of the defense contractors. Hasn't said anything yet about what about all the thousands and thousands of people that have seen these, that have said they've seen them sitting in the field next to their house, that have had contact with them, that they haven't opened that door yet. But the fact is that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to keep that closed. So what we have to see is what type of feathering in of the information do they want to undertake, and what can be done by us as citizens to put pressure on them to give more information than they are deciding through their own crafted narrative that they want to give. That's the process that's going on. And, and obviously Bigelow is free to tell the rest of the world. He's got the money to do it. Here, let me show you everything everybody's told me. They got MUFON has got all the kind of things. They've got tons of files. What we have to do now that the door has been kicked open a little bit and people have gotten beyond, that's the way we're going to start the intensive at 5 o'clock is starting where you say, okay, now we've crossed this river. Okay, we're on the other side of the river now.
Exactly.
And so here are the different, instead of spending all of our time trying to convince each other as to what we're willing to say to other citizens to try to get them to understand that UFOs are real, that they're extraterrestrial or in some weird sense extra-dimensional or something, that they're real and that we believe that they've actually recovered some of the craft and that they're trying to back engineer these things. We've been spending virtually all of our time trying to get that to happen. Now it's happened.
I think it might be a good idea. Like 13 years ago, I did co-author a book on disclosure, and when Bryce and I wrote that, we instinctively thought, this is back in 2010, that a disclosure would happen like an avalanche. So one big leak that could not be denied would cause a whole cascading effect. Now, starting in 2017, that did not happen. what we saw was there was sufficient control over, at least in my opinion, over most of the media, that it was a very limited, controlled break. But
modified hangout.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I don't think it was, because I do think it was the result of an active movement of one faction that then received a lot of resistance. But we might now, I wonder if we're at an avalanche, a potential avalanche moment. If this story continues to have legs and other whistleblowers can come out, you really have to wonder where this will end, and that could make things really, really interesting. And the other thing I would add is, this is strategy time now, because you have to assume the other side, the secrecy side, is plotting their counter moves. I can't think they're just going to walk away from the table. And so you got to wonder, what is the strategy of those who want to push this forward going to be? What are the likely things that the other side is going to do? There's some other hands coming up here. Should we, someone else want to just jump up? Is that Linda? Hey. All right. Give her a mic, yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if, in addition to the internecine warfare that has been going on between JSOC, AARO, and several offices in the Pentagon, as I have been told for several months, that one of the things that they are trying to accomplish is to keep animal mutilations by ETs, human abductions by ETs, hybridization by ETs. They want it all to be wrapped up over here, while watch the pretty balls and lights and gleams, and let's keep our contact with ETs here.
Totally agree.
My own conviction is that that is a mistake. That if we are finally going to be at the decade in the century where the government of the United States is finally going to break through its lies since World War II, that it better do all of the difficult subjects. Because what I see, and I've been trying to get to the bottom of all of this for 44 years, we now are in a country in which the vast majority of people, including myself, I do not trust the government of the United States. But the reason I don't trust is that they had so many opportunities to tell the truth that would have opened up many things that they think are impossible to open up, but they are opening up anyway. And that the headlines today are going to make the door easier for everyone in all facets to now start being interviewed. Wouldn't this be the perfect time to say, we apologize, United States. We have kept this secret in respect for you as humans in a government that is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And we didn't think you could handle it. But if they go forward now with exactly what you guys were pointing to, if this degenerates into AARO, you stay here, NRO, you're going to take over, and everything in between is then going to be, you cannot talk unless you have permission. Because that's where this today feels like. This was a great beginning, but if they don't continue with honest opening up everything, Trappist, from what I understand, I've been told for a year, we have been to the TRAPPIST solar system. We know that Webb has evidence of artificial frequencies in planet E in the TRAPPIST-1 system. Artificial frequencies is what we generate in cities at night on Earth. If they try to have their cake and eat it too, open up a little bit about the possibility of artificial light on TRAPPIST. And they don't tell the whole story of how many solar systems we have been to with the help of the tall whites and the Nordics. We're going to be entering into a schizophrenic stage again of people who will be allowed to tell this truth, but God help you, me. Animal mutilations are a part of this. Human abductions are a part of this. Hybridization is a part of this. And I'm not trying to overtake the time here, and I
No,
apologize.
you're
if I've
perfect.
gone-
You're saying the exactly, I completely agree with you.
Well, and if we don't get what seems to be honest, professional truth about what the government knows about hybridization, about animal mutilations, about the fact that all around this planet, some with agreements with the government, that there are non-humans who are based on this planet, have been based on this planet for millions of years, throughout our solar system and many solar systems. In other words, is this going to be reality finally opening up?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be a whole other Broadway production in which we are only going to be allowed to see this moving ball and this moving ball? Because I love you guys, and I think that humanity deserves the whole truth, not these pieces that are selected because a government or governments, they're terrified that we are going to collapse on the sidewalk. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We need truth. And I'm sorry, I talked too long, but...
Linda, you were absolutely perfect.
Thank you. That was perfect.
Thank you. I just want to add and jump on. I've felt for years there's disclosure, but then there's 1,000 layers of disclosure. It's like you can be the president and say, yes, there are aliens here, and then walk out of the room and say, I'm going on vacation for 6 months. But there are 1,000 additional questions, including exactly what you're saying. So when we disclose, the answer is how much is being disclosed? What actually is the full, deep truth of everything that is happening, including mutilations, including abductions, and everything else? And or is it simply a matter of the other side playing defense and moving a little bit further down the field, but they're still holding the line on everything else? But we could ask, what are they doing?
Well, yeah. Well, this is exactly.
Thank you, Linda.
This is exactly the subject matter of the events that will follow right after this. That the 5 o'clock intensive is directed to this particular issue. What are the questions that remain now that this question seems to be getting answered? What are the additional questions? What are the considerations that need to go into accounting for, what we do in response to when they start feathering information out? This is the discussion that we have to have. This is actually the discussion that you came here to have this weekend. And it turns out that as things have developed, it's those of you who have waited until Monday afternoon that are going to be the ones participating in this. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably have to break our huddle soon to move to the next one, but there is a hand up in the back there, sir. If you can speak up.
I have to ask, because you have mentioned, Mr. Sheehan, about the allies of humanity, and I think this is the next stage. Now that we've all finally come to this point where we have news like this on the news, although it's not, the top news, it's still, in my opinion, pretty unprecedented what they disclosed and how long that segment was. I'm floored. I think at this point now it's time to focus on, just because they're aliens doesn't necessarily mean they have our best interests at heart. So now we can start looking at, the filtering process of who are the good guys and who are not, and who's working with who, because we know how the story goes. But what do you think about the allies of humanity?
Well, Marshall has written a series of books called The Allies of Humanity, in which he has laid out some details about this. And what he's really doing is saying that, look, there's going to come a point in time when the dam starts to break and starts to leak here, in that there's going to be a rush on the part of a lot of people, first to come rushing forward and saying, oh, good, they're going to cure cancer. You know, they're going to figure out an alternative source of energy to substitute for oil and petroleum. We can prevent and roll back global climate change. They can get rid of nuclear weapons. You know, there's going to be that group of our people that do that. There's going to be other people that come forward and say, oh, this is terrible. You know, they're going to come and eat us. You know, they're going to kill us and our children and carry off our men. You know, this is a dynamic that's getting ready to start. What we need to do, in my opinion, those of us who have been at this for some years and gathering regularly any number of times during the course of each year to discuss these things, what we've got to do is shift gears here to turn our attention to trying to address some of these questions rather than stay trapped in the old questions. Is, are UFOs real? Have they got any craft? Have they been trying to back engineer them? Are they lying to us? You know, I mean, those are all pretty well answered now as of this morning, okay? So what we have to do is turn our attention toward this more constructive conversation and say, what are the additional questions? I've laid out to begin with 20 questions, like the old game. We got a game of 20 questions that we're going to be playing in the events starting at 5 o'clock. Here are some of the questions. What are the answers? What do people think the answers are? How do we structure ourselves here? These structures that we have of gathering people together, you know, once a year at the Contact in the Desert or more times, you know, that we haven't structured ourselves in a way to really facilitate a widespread education and a widespread conversation about these issues. We have to start having those meetings and discussions now. Richard and I have been kind of talking about this. What do we set up? We have to have a 501c3 public interest operation. We have one at our Romero Institute that has done the Iran-Contra case and the Karen Silkwood case and the 3 Mile Island case and Pentagon Papers and all that stuff that we've done in the past. But what we have to do is open up and try to get as many people involved in a cooperative conversation as we possibly can to start identifying what these questions are, what the criteria are by means of which we're going to try to secure the answers to these questions, and how we're going to make some of these subjective answers to provide a protocol. I mean, the question is there anything conceivable that could be known about what the alien agenda is, that we'd have to exercise some care about how we go about revealing that to everybody. That's a question. Now, we've all had the luxury for the last 75 years, some of us 45 years, 47 years, 50 years. We've had the luxury of saying, oh yeah, well, if we can get there, we just think that'll tell them absolutely everything. Just give it to them. Let's go. And we were in a position where we had the luxury to do that. We now are in a position where we're going to have to start exercising some careful thinking about how we're going to go about this. Not because we're any part of any elite or anything, but we have to figure out how we effectively get information through to people who have different worldviews, who have different levels of education, different levels of trust in government, different levels of trust in humanity. This is an extraordinarily serious conversation that we have to start. And that's why I'm inviting everybody to come at 5 o'clock and start participating in this particular conversation, because this is where it starts today, here, in Contact in the Desert.
You didn't say 5 o'clock, it's 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
In addition to figuring out, there's some more hands up. I'll just very quickly say, in addition to finding out how we're going to convey a message, we still have to figure out how we're going to acquire and be sure about our information, so that we can know what kind of, if there's a collective message that we want to do, things like that.
That's right.
Linda wants to say something again.
5 to 8, I'm doing animal mutilations. Even in our small world, we are in competition in time.
Yep.
Okay, Linda, 5
we're going
o'clock,
right over.
Animal mutes.
We're going to go right over from here, I think, over to the Atlantis room.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take a while to get all moved over there and everybody coming over there. So that what we need to do is we might want to all get together, and start having these conversations so that we can insert. Pardon?
Yeah, she's got a lot.
Yeah.
And now I think it's almost destined because it's 3 hours of everything.
I hear you. All right. All right. So everybody should just decide what you want to do. Just that I know that this is sort of a late breaking event. It happens to have fit in directly with what was we were going to be talking about at the one at the Atlantis room.
Yeah.
But just let everybody know about what the options are, and we're going to start the conversation. It'll all be videotaped. So
we were given we're running out of time. Do we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, or should we break? We got like 5 minutes. I'm seeing there's still hands. I know people still want to ask questions.
Yeah, we're all going over at 4, right?
I'm going wherever they tell me to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, looks like we're going to break.
Okay, we're going to Atlantis now, okay?
All right, everyone, it's been wonderful. We're going to continue this adventure. It's been great. Thank you for being here. Let's keep on.